If people want me to. It's not.
I'm getting, right now, we're kind of, it's a wonder if it's a, property owners or.
We didn't really have the budget.
That would be the issue.
I think they made it.
Yeah, well, yeah, because it was, back in 2001, they were going to go to. Participated, it wasn't unanimous, but it was still enough to say, okay, we're going to have anyway. It was an interesting wrinkle, but I said, whoa.
Were you guys before? So we'll see what happens. I don't know. Oh, it's 6:30.
My budget, did it?
Oh, there's
No. What do you do?
I got benefits here. She wants, says a lot of
No, it's his. I have mine.
Is it black and white?
Bessie has mine.
It's in black and white.
It says color, but we didn't figure that initially.
Yeah, I saw colors.
Yeah, you did get raised, Nancy, and I got bills built up.
Okay.
Should we switch folders now?
No, because I got mine tabbed to colors. What? We could switch
Well,
this.
I got raised. She's got raised.
Okay. I'll call to order the Albany Revitalization Agency meeting. May we have a roll call, please?
Sykes. Vernick.
Here.
Pearson.
Here.
Keller.
Here.
Canopa.
Here.
Folden.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Summers. Kellum.
Here.
Langyar.
Here.
Kopzinski.
Here.
Coburn.
I'm right here.
For the record, Mr. Coburn. Johnson.
Here.
Thompson.
Here.
And Allison Sykes is excused.
Thank you.
And Will as well. Those are the two I know of.
Thank you.
Okay, first on the agenda is the election of officers. Currently, the slate is myself as chair, Colleen Keller as vice chair, and Michael Thompson as secretary. We have nominations.
Move to renominate the existing slate.
A second.
All right. Are the nominees okay with that?
Yep.
Yep.
Oh.
Okay. All those in favor?
Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign? Okay. Any public comment this evening? All right. We also have before us the minutes from the April 27th, 2017 and May 4th, 2017 ARA meetings.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. So our scheduled business tonight is the budget message.
And we got the same one handed to us on the last this morning.
Good evening, Chair Folden and committee members. We're here tonight to present a proposed budget for the Albany Revitalization Agency and subsequently for the City of Albany. This is the council's fourth meeting this week, and they've already logged about 7.5 hours. So I'm hoping that tonight's meeting will be informative and productive, but also efficient. As I mentioned, up first for your consideration is the ARA budget. As you well know, we now have an economic development manager. Mr. Seth Sherry has been with us since February, and he's jumped into the economic development and urban renewal roles. And tonight he'll be presenting the budget for ARA's next fiscal year. One important note, the second line of the first page says that the budget is $3.4 million for fiscal year 2018 and 19. If you've examined the budget closely, you know that it's not that. That figure should be $10.29 million. I apologize for the error, and of course we'll be correcting it as soon as possible. Albany's only urban renewal district has seen some very visible and significant progress towards its goals during the last year, and we look forward to making further progress next year after helping the board to refine its criteria for project prioritization and to update CARA policy guidelines. We're also looking forward to helping Albany's citizens understand the benefits our revitalization efforts bring when we celebrate the completion of the streetscape project later this summer. So with that, now let me introduce Seth to go over the ARA budget for 2018 to 19.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for having us this evening. I am happy to answer questions as they come up. I want to provide a brief overview of our budget message, and then Jorge and I will go over the details of the budget itself. Urban renewal in Albany is, in my opinion, at a nexus right now, not in terms of relevancy, but of focus and priorities. I'm happy to come on and fill the position of the full-time staff person, which has been, there's been some absence there for a little while. We've finished this year and will soon finish 3 or 4 large infrastructure projects. There was some in public projects such as the carousel, the fire and police station, and now the streetscape project. There is a significant need that still exists for the ARA to play a leading role in reducing blight and its causes throughout the Cara district. As the urban renewal well, I should say as an outsider, first of all, not having lived in Albany for a long time, but with some inside knowledge, having spent much of my life nearby here, I've been astonished at the revitalization that the ARA has encouraged within the Cara district. And as the urban renewal manager, I'm very optimistic and excited about helping the ARA and the Cara Advisory Board chart a path towards accomplishing many of the original redevelopment projects that were informed through public input, and ultimately charting a course to sunsetting the urban renewal district. Our primary goal for this coming year is project prioritization and the associated planning. And that's really a 3-part process. The first is the importance of providing some urban renewal training to the Cara Advisory Board. There's been some turnover in the last few years, and so bringing everybody up to the same level of understanding of what we're capable of doing and how we can go about doing that will be important. The next would be to also solicit some public input when we're ready to help reprioritize and rank projects. And then thirdly, and of great significance, is a fiscal planning. We need to be smart about how we can eventually chart a course for reaching what is called the total maximum indebtedness, and that's really our borrowing capacity that was authorized at the inception of the district. There's a secondary goal as well, and that's to provide some policy updates and refinement, I would say, for further facilitation and smoother facilitation for achieving the goals within the Cara plan. So that's a snapshot of our plans for this coming year, and I wanted to provide you a few slides just to touch on briefly what we've done. I say we loosely. The Urban Renewal District has accomplished in terms of public-private partnerships and public infrastructure this last year, and just overview quickly goals for next year. In total, there has been just over $100,000 of money put towards public-private partnerships. If you look at how much that $100,000 leveraged in private investment, it equals roughly a 1-to-5 ratio, which is fairly positive actually. For every public dollar invested, there was 5 private dollars invested, which meets very closely and aligns well with the goals of the district. There has been just over $5 million spent on public projects, the lion's share of that being the streetscape work, and then the associated $100,000 or so with the wayfinding signage that is accompanying the new streetscape work and will be installed here shortly. Here's a quick snapshot of the public-private partnerships from this last year. To date, from the fiscal year, there's been 8 projects funded, and again, you can see there the just over $100,000 public funding leveraged over $500,000 in private funding. In terms of anticipated projects for this coming year, there really isn't any budgeted for projects per se. There are 5 identified programs that have been around for some time. There's grants and a few loan programs. If we were to spend in totality what is budgeted for those, it would be about $470,000. So this includes grants and loans. Typically, in the history of the district, there's also been a number of ad hoc loans given as projects of significance come up that don't really meet the standards for the 5 programs that have been outlined. And so I expect some of those to come up as well this year. And again, as I noted earlier, project prioritization and some significant fiscal planning, i.e. understanding what our borrowing capacity is to pursue projects of significance this year and for the next 5 years, as I estimate it. So that's really the plan for this coming year. Jorge can now,
Okay, Seth,
Yes,
can you
sir.
go back to your very first slide? Because
Of course.
I got confused on one.
here?
Yeah, you said it's a 1 to 5, 100, but you show 100,000, then you show 5 million.
Yeah,
And then you said, on the small slide, I couldn't read the small slide, it said it was
Sure.
only 500,000. That's a 1 to 5.
right. So that's a little misleading, I guess. The 1 to 5 ratio comes into play on this slide, where there's been over $500,000 of private dollars
Okay.
invested from the $100,000 of public. This is just meant to be a snapshot, so sorry if that was unclear. Yeah. But on the other side, there's been public projects alone, which I'm not counting in that leverage
Okay.
ratio, and that's about $5 million. Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, good evening, Chair Bolden and Budget Committee members. This other section, we're just going to go over the program, the CARA program, which is the 209-11-1102. And what I'll do is I'll try to highlight some of the items, and then I'll allow some time for some questions, then Seth and I will be trying to answer as questions as much as possible here. If we start on the top, the property revenues, the current property revenues we're expecting will be increasing by about $551,000. That's about 20% increase in TIF revenue that we're expecting out of the CARA district. We also have about, we're calculating like 50,000 will be in delinquency that will be reported into the city. The next item that is probably the notice here is the settlement proceeds. We have a property that was foreclosed, and the individual is paying about $100 a month. That's why we have a $1,200 line item there. Then the next item to note would be the 47001 loan proceeds. This is related to the streetscape project. We had a budget for the last fiscal year of $7.5 million, and we have a proposed budget for this year, which is the remaining dollars that are to be paid for this project. It's about, when we ran this report, it was up $3.3 million. So the beginning balance for this year, we're expecting to be around, it's going to be $3.5 million for a total revenue section of $10.29 million. And as you can see, there's a decrease of 18.80%, which is mainly due to the streetscape project that is going to go off the books here. Then moving down the line here on the expenditure materials and services, an item to note that has gone up a little bit here is the central service charges, and that's related to, we received these from finance, but basically there's some increases in terms of rent to help fund some of the facility works, such as HVACs and other items. That
Hey, Jorge,
need to be-
can you go back to 47001? I don't understand that line.
47001. That's the amount of the loan that we took for the streetscape project, for the downtown streetscape project.
Okay.
So those are the monies that are coming in to pay the project. So they come in as revenue as a loan.
But so far, none's come in year to date.
It's not visible in this report, but about, I just ran the report today, is about $5 million that have come in to date.
These numbers in the year-to-date are through March?
When we did the internal budget process was in March, that is correct, yeah.
So they're through March or through February?
I can't remember the exact date I did download out of the system, but it was probably right around March, middle of March, yeah.
Okay.
Which
Yeah.
would show a February ending or middle of March?
It would be year-to-date through the middle of March.
But as of today, there's about $4.9 million that have been charged or paid on this line item. The next item that I wanted to highlight is 67009 property taxes. We're paying $6,600 in property taxes. This is also a property that was foreclosed, that it's being rented, since we're generating some revenues, income out of it, we have to pay property taxes on this property.
Which property?
222 Third Avenue.
The Labor Temple property?
Yeah. The next item to note here is the 67063, the Letman, which I believe is the Fort Miller property.
It is.
And that is a forgivable loan. I believe it was like $336,000, and next year we'll have an outstanding balance to complete that of $33,600. Most of the other projects will be closed by this coming fiscal year. The next item to note will be the 67211, which is the architectural assistance. We've had incurred about $28,000 in architectural assistance, so we only budget $14,000 last time, so this time we just budget $21,000. The small grants will remain the same at $25,000. And then the other project, which is 67825, it's a project for a natural sprinkles, and that is a $50,000 project. Out of the $50,000, $30,000 been issued this year, and we have a balance of $20,000 for next year.
What is that for?
That is a state grant.
Yeah, and it was a grant that was given.
Yeah, I know which one.
Yeah, that's right. And in fact, they've done the second to last drawdown as of this week, or they made a request for that, so there's only $5,000 remaining on that project, and that'll be done by the end of this fiscal year.
If we go down to the capital project section, the only project that we have to pay off.
You're going to skip over that big, huge number of 4.1 million
Which one?
in the reserves?
Yeah, the $1.5 million is available for Kara to allocate to other projects that might come in, like
So-
the ones that we have closed here. So it's just funds available for Kara to assign for other grants and stuff like that.
And if I could just add, that would be typically the pool that these ad hoc loans or other projects would come out of that aren't identifiable in the current program.
Correct. The next section will be the capital project section. The only project that we have forecasted for the coming year is just closing out the streetscape project with the balance of, here you can see the year-to-date on the project. The other one was just revenue, so that's why you didn't see the year-to-date, so you can see that 4.9. And then we have a capital reserve also to be allocated to projects as the Kara board and ARA decide to allocate those. We have $2.6 million available for other capital projects. The next section will be the transfer out section. So we have $50,000 going from Kara to the general fund, and this is specifically for the court enforcement partnership that we have with police. So we are in the third year out of 5 years, and that's where this $50,000 is going to. The next one, 92,232, is to basically transferring from Kara to pay the salaries of the folks like Seth and the folks involved in Kara and economic development. The last section would be the debt service section. And we have two bonds that we're currently paying, one bond that we're currently paying, which is, principal is $383,000 and the interest is $80,000. The next one is 94,004, which is, we're going to start making payments into the streetscape project, and we are, it's going to be it's actually going to be $675,000, of which $205,000 are interest. That's why these new line items are here for the streetscape project. Start paying back that $7.5 million loan. And then we have some reserves for debt services, and then for any future debt services, we divide them in two sections here. And that kind of covers the entire Kara budget of $10.29 million. Any questions?
Yeah, just a comment. It's nothing that Seth has caused or anything. He's just kind of caught in the seam of coming in and having to go through this not real fun process of reprioritizing, which we have done more than one time. And my concern is that it's devolving into a hiatus again where we don't do anything in Cara. And we need to get off the dime, get our money borrowed so that it's there for us to use for the major projects that need to be done, so we can sunset Cara and get TIF back to the original organizations that wanted it. As long as we keep dilly-dallying around, this is going to keep going on until we're all underground.
I agree completely.
Yeah, Ray kind of stole what I wanted to say. Back to the narrative page, it talks about a 32,200,000 remaining of that 56 million possible indebtedness, which isn't even, I thought we had passed the halfway point of that. But that's really neither here nor there. Don't answer that. If this is, then we're not, after 2001, it's now 2000, after 17 years, we're not even at the halfway, and this is not really for Seth.
We should have been long past halfway.
Yeah,
by now.
I'm just agreeing with Ray said, and sometimes I'm the only member of the public, I've missed a few CARE meetings, conflict with dance class for my little one, but I'm the only one, and I sit there and I listen, there's no sense of urgency. And once again, it's not Seth's fault, he's brand new to this, but I mean, I kind of trolled when you talked about back at the CIP meeting, you talked about your plans for the next year of reprioritizing. I've gone over the 2001 plan. I know it's a bit outdated, but I mean, that's not the problem. The problem is just a lack of desire to do the big things, to get this program on the path to wrapping it up. And I think that's the best thing you could do, is to say it is going to end at some time. 18 years, if we're halfway, we're past 30 years of this thing, and I realize the concept doesn't include a time date to it. I understand it's tied to borrowing, but I don't think any one of the other jurisdictions imagined beyond a 30-year plan for this. And I think it's the best thing you can do, the folks on the CARE board, is just to say we have a plan to end this thing at a reasonable time. So that's my editorial comment on this.
Projects.
Yes.
Bottom line, before you borrow, you have to have the money to pay for it, which means you have to have the projects, which means they have to not be public projects. They have to be private projects that are going to form a TIF. So going out and just getting the money is an awful thing to do, because all you're doing is using up money that we now have. Now, you are correct in we need to make a plan and get it done. We are robbing the rest of the budget. Our budget.
I would just say,
and the county budget. Excuse me. I didn't interrupt you.
Well, no.
Please.
Okay. Yeah. I'll come back to it, because I hear that phrase or phrases like that, and I just.
It is exactly that.
No.
When over time you have inflation caused by Uncle Sam, that causes the cost of everything to go up, including houses. That then becomes TIF, unearned TIF. Now, when we have a chief of police or whomsoever, anybody in the room, they get paid a lot more than they got paid in 2002. All the difference comes out of the budget. We are taking the money out of the budget that pays the increase for them. So what happens is, you get less, or the county gets less, or whatever it is diverting it from the use that it was supposed to be, because we're sitting on our butt.
Okay, Michael?
Okay, the last part, sitting on our butt, I can agree with that. But this idea of robbing or siphoning implies that when someone steals from me, people can steal from me if you're going to take that money or take some other money and improve my house. Feel free at a 1-to-5 ratio to go ahead and steal $1,000 from me and put $5,000 in improving my house. I'm fine with that. That's fine robbing, that's fine siphoning. And I think you know that. But, I mean, what I wanted to say is like I said, I'm one of the few members of the public that sits out there, and you guys meet, the CARE board meets like 9 times a year. It just goes to, there's no sense of urgency. And if you said it good off your butt, I agree with that. I'll leave it at that point.
Any questions?
2 minutes, or 15 seconds.
Good, you already had 2 minutes, so go ahead.
Okay,
But Rich,
15.
if you-
Bottom line, when you take money out of the system, you are using it. And the longer it goes on, the worse it gets. I mean, diesel now costs $3. In 2002, it cost $1.18. The difference comes from the county and 4-H, or, 4-H. Or is that 4-H? The county, the city, and when it comes from the city, it either we spend less on stuff, or it comes from other parts of the city. So everybody pays for it. It's not just downtown, it's not just the Carrot Place.
So, and I've said it before, the money wouldn't be there today if it hadn't been for establishing the urban renewal. But I really don't think this is the budget meeting to be discussing really the merits of our urban renewal program. We've all been there, done that. I think we just need to be focusing on
That's fine,
this
that's
budget.
fine. But it's that, see, Rich, you're making arguments against the concept of urban renewal in many ways.
A lot of
And
places
that's
got rid of
the
it.
kind of stuff that causes you guys to not do anything. I sit there in the meetings as a member of the public, and it's just, I've joked to people, the last project, the last dollar spent by this, there will be a discussion over, is this the right thing that we should be doing with urban renewal? When you've signed the final $100,000, there will be a debate over if it's the right thing. It's like,
Then that should happen every single time. That
no,
debate should always happen.
you make decisions about your strategic plan, and you follow, that's why the strategic plan is in here. You're right, we're getting into off the thing, but.
Well, the good news.
You guys you've just personified as to why we are so far behind on this program.
Well, the good news is that Seth has a plan to address and prioritize some of these projects that hopefully.
Good luck to Seth,
We'll
'cause
get.
we're gonna go
this done.
through this over and over
Yeah.
again.
I think that I think Seth will be successful in moving this forward, and with the support of the community and the CARE board, we'll be able to move some of these that you have concerns with as well.
And I'll just say in closing, I do appreciate everyone's comments on the need for a sense of urgency. I do share that, even though I haven't been here for 20 years, and I don't, Ray, maybe to your point, don't intend on starting a new planning effort and starting from scratch. I think we have a good foundation to work off of, and I'm confident that we can make some big decisions to really move this forward, and I share that urgency, so thank you.
Okay, so we have a resolution before us.
Move to approve the resolution for the ARA budget for 2018.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
All right. Motion carries. Any other business for the committee? Okay, so this meeting will be continued to, or not continued. We don't have to continue for you. Okay, it's adjourned.
Now we have the big one.
Actually, that book here, kid.
It's always easy to spend somebody else's money.
All right, I'd like to call to order the City of Albany Budget Committee meeting. May we have a roll call, please?
Sykes? Vernig?
Hi.
Pearson?
Here.
Keller?
Here.
Canopa?
Here.
Folden?
Here.
Olson?
Here.
Summers? Kellum?
Here.
Langyard?
Here.
Kopzinski?
Here.
Coburn?
Here.
Johnson? Here. Thompson?
Here.
Thank you. Next up is election of officers. We currently have the same slate this last year as the ARA committee. Any nominations?
Move to nominate the current slate.
Second?
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. So now we have a public hearing statement for the state shared revenue. So this is the public hearing to receive public comments in the city's use of state shared revenues as part of the proposed budget for fiscal year 2017-2018. Public hearing is open at 7 p.m. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to comment? Okay, the public hearing is closed at 7 point, half a minute. All right, so is there any other public comment for the regular budget meeting? Any emails, anything received? Okay. Anybody in the audience with public comment for the budget committee? Okay, we have before us the minutes from the April 2017 up through the recent April 5th Capital Improvement Program meeting.
Move to approve the minutes as written.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I abstain. I wasn't at one of the meetings.
Okay. All right, we are ready for the budget message.
Good evening again, Chair Bolden and committee members. I'm happy to present to you tonight the proposed budget for 2018 to 2019 fiscal year. This budget reflects the council's collective policy decisions and priorities, and it allocates resources to provide for government operations using the precious resources of its citizens. As the city's budget committee, you've reviewed the strategic plan and you'll now hear from city staff. Every program in the city's budget supports the council's strategic intent, and each of our department directors will describe their budgets and how they operationalize the strategic plan. In any organization, as I talked about, competing needs and priorities always determine the budget. There just aren't enough resources to meet every need or fund every good idea. The need to weigh those competing needs and to live within our budget never stops. And to help guide the formulation of the budget, our finance director provided an early estimate that indicated we could anticipate an approximate 4% increase in property tax revenue. In keeping with the city's conservative fiscal policy, city departments were asked to help limit budget increases within the general fund to stay well under that 4%. As we discussed at the first budget meeting for this cycle, and as I reiterated earlier this year, our approach to building this budget was to, 1, maintain existing levels of service wherever possible, 2, make adjustments based on good business cases, and 3, replenish our reserves to the extent possible. With this budget, we've succeeded in maintaining service levels, but the cost of providing existing levels of service continues to grow. Operating costs continue to rise at a rate that exceeds the growth of the general fund, driven in part by an increase in PERS rates. The League of Oregon Cities recognizes this, and in their most recent newsletter have identified options that would mitigate rates. In their words, and I quote, "Frequent and consistent engagement by city leaders with their legislators will be key to achieving sustainable reforms and protecting essential local government service levels." I recommend to you last Friday's League of Oregon Cities newsletter. We've also made significant adjustments. The Parks and Recreation Department will describe the steps they've taken to reorganize and thereby save 1.1 FTE. And earlier this year, the council provided authorization to add a position to the municipal court staff to be able to provide follow-up for a growing caseload. Finance will describe the staffing change needed to implement a modernized financial system. Unfortunately, we've not been as successful as I had hoped at replenishing our reserves. While we've managed to bring you a balanced budget for 2018 and 19, the rising cost of operations has hindered our ability to build reserves. Reserves have been only slightly increased. We've established a City Hall Facility Reserve Fund, supported by an increase in rental fees, which you heard a little bit about from Seth and Jorge, and that's for departments that are located in City Hall, to address issues such as the need to replace an aging HVAC system as identified by Councilor Sykes earlier this year. Within individual departments, some asset replacement funds have been used to offset the costs of maintaining levels of service. Others have been supplemented with additional funds. As I've outlined in the budget message, there are very compelling reasons to rebuild reserves. But the imperative to restore our reserves competes with the need to continue providing quality public services. More worrisome is the fact that the rising costs of service constitute a trend that just isn't sustainable over the long run without reductions in service levels. Revenues are increasing, but they're not keeping pace with projected expenditures at current staffing levels. In addition to PERS and healthcare costs, the costs of construction and major maintenance are rising at rates much higher than inflation. This makes it more challenging to maintain our infrastructure, our major capital assets. Within the city's enterprise funds, aging pipes and new stormwater regulations will add pressure to rates in our stormwater utility. The water and wastewater utilities are mature utilities and have the advantage of larger and better developed funding bases, but they too will need capital investments to maintain their long-term functionality. HB 2017, the state's transportation bill that was passed last summer, will see the city receiving additional funds for street maintenance and transit, approximately $800,000 in 2019. Although the HB 2017 funds will increase to $1.7 million by 2027, the need for street maintenance funding will be significantly greater. There is some good news. Unemployment rates for Mid-Valley counties are staying at or near record low levels, as seen earlier in 2017, and with continued low unemployment, median household income is rising in all 4 counties and statewide. We've received final rates on health insurance premium increases, and they're substantially less than the 13% we had expected and budgeted for. Nevertheless, with expenses outpacing revenues, it's not difficult to see that if unchanged, those 2 trend lines will never meet, and changes will have to be made. We will look diligently for every efficiency and organizational improvement that we can find and resort to service level reductions only as a last resort. In closing, it's worth noting that the city's next budget after this one will be a biennial budget. This will enable a longer-term look at financial needs while significantly reducing the resources required to prepare budgets. This process improvement will start with the 2019 to 2021 biennium. This budget reflects the hard work of many people. I'd like to thank you for your guidance and your oversight, and I'd like to thank our staff for their diligent efforts to prioritize and to recognize efficiencies wherever possible, and to train me on the Albany budget and budget processing. We will have some difficult decisions to make after this budget is adopted or when it's adopted as we prepare the next budget. We'll never have enough to meet all the demands for service, but with uncompromising integrity, which does not, I might add, have a dollar value, we will always exercise stewardship of the funds we do have to provide quality services and maintain the finances of the city in sound shape. Okay, tonight we have police, fire, and Parks and Recreation to provide budget summaries and answer your questions, but before I turn this mic over to Chief Latanzio, are there any preliminary questions?
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Budget Committee. Tonight, the budget presentation that I have prepared is similar to the ones that I've done in the past. So what I'm going to come to do is go through kind of a crime picture so you kind of understand currently where Albany stands, some of the issues that we're having, and then to go through and look at our budget. Our budget is basically, doesn't add any positions to it. What we did is we were given enough money to be able to maintain. But plus, I also had to dip into my equipment replacement for about $200,000 in order to balance the budget from some of the funds that we had put in there from before from the sale of the, was from TLT, additional funds, and then from the sale of the armory. So looking at our staffing for 2018, 2019, same staffing level that we've had this year. So it's 98.25 total authorized positions. Now, if all of the sworn officers were trained and ready to go and work in the field, I have allocated 4 different positions for hiring and training, because we already have somebody retiring and somebody in that process. This is what it would look like, but I'm currently not there. So when I go through it, I'll kind of show you where we are as far as some of the shortfalls we're having right now. I currently have 4 in the academy, I have 2 on FTO, and I have 1 vacancy. So that's 8 positions that I don't have allocated anywhere. So that kind of puts a hit to our ability to be able to respond to calls for service. So currently, right now, we are on 12-hour shifts. So we're working 7 to 7. We have recently made some adjustments to night crew. We're putting 2 officers working 3 to 3. So they come on at 3 p.m. and leave at 3 a.m. So that leaves us from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. with only 5 officers working the street. But it gives us 2 additional officers during the higher peak times. And so far that seemed to be working pretty well to answer for calls for service. So when we're looking at our crime stats for those people, especially in the home audience, who don't understand what Part 1 crimes are, the FBI categorizes crimes into 2 categories, Part 1s and Part 2s. Part 1s are primarily the ones that are more significant crimes, and that's also subdivided into violent and property crime. So when we look at the violent crime, it's your homicide, rape, robbery, aggravated assault. And then when you look at your property crime, you kind of look at any type of theft. So whether you're breaking into a business, you're breaking into a building, you're shoplifting, stealing a car, those types of things are considered your property crime, and they also include arson. So when you look at our violent crime, Albany typically, over the years, have had an extremely low violent crime rate. Now, one thing you have to remember is last year in April, we changed our CAD-RMS system, which is our computer automated dispatch / records management system. The system that we had before was from the early 90s. And the new system that we have now is more of a Windows-based system, where the other system was more of like a DOS-based system. Well, some of the issues we had with the old system was the accuracy of some of our numbers and the ability of that system to be able to categorize what we needed to categorize in order to present the data to the FBI. So one of the issues you'll see here is you'll see an uptick in violent crime from 2016 to 2017. We don't think we actually had an uptick. We think what that is from our aggravated assaults not being reported correctly in the old system. Because the old system, because every state has the laws done differently, well, a lot of other states, what they consider a felony, here they consider it a misdemeanor. Well, when you're dealing with a weapon, it may not always, sometimes it's multiple charges that makes up the aggravated assault, where here that's a misdemeanor, because the old system couldn't capture it and wouldn't categorize it as an aggravated assault. So the new system does do that. So some of the problems that we are having now using data and comparing it to previous years is the data is not always matching the same, which is the same thing for calls for service when I go through that, because the new system does it differently than the old system did it. So we try to normalize it as much as possible. So when we're looking at upticks, sometimes we don't think the upticks is as big as we are projecting, but we won't know for sure until we're in it for about 2 years. Then we should be able to get some good data, because this 2018 will be the first full year of data where we're able to compare to the other years. When you look at our property crime rate is the lowest that it's ever been when you look at 2017. So if you look at 2016, we're 0.17% below the Oregon average. Now we believe, we don't know what the new Oregon average is going to be, but we believe we're under it. So when you look at the total property crime rate, we're under the Oregon average. So in 2016 we were under, and we believe in 2017 we'll also be under. That is the first time that we know we've ever been under the Oregon average. So the men and women of the Albany Police Department have really been working hard trying to attack some of those areas that we were having a lot of issues with. and it's property crime. What's it related to? It's related to drugs. We had a huge drug issue here, and we've really concentrated and put a lot of effort into combating that. That was one reason the task force has been stand up, that we are trying to put extra emphasis into combating drugs, illegal activity. And I think that's really helped. Also, with a lot of the CompStat stuff we do and the increase in communication has helped us to be able to target the specific areas that we need to work on and make those arrests. If you look at 2016 Part 1 crime, violent crime, when you're looking at compared to other cities, Albany is the lowest. Even when you look at the increase that we had for 2017, I still think we'll be probably right at the very bottom. The property crime, we're not there. We're about throughout the Oregon average right now, so probably a drop under it. I'm just looking at property crime specifically. And then when you look at total Part 1 crimes compared to the other city populations, currently right now we're about 5th, where before we were always 3rd. So, but then grants passed before was never in the mix where they are now, because it depends who's reporting and who's reporting into the system and what the FBI accepts. If your numbers, if they don't believe your numbers are correct, they won't put you in the data set. And then sometimes we can't use that for comparison to kind of see where we are. When you look at officer per 1,000 inhabitants, if you go back to 2008 and see what the ratio is, and you look at the 2017, we currently now have 65 sworn. When you look at 2008, the ratio, we're still not there to where we were almost 10 years ago. We're doing a little bit better. Just because the property crime's down and some of the Part 1 crimes are down, that doesn't mean the Part 2 crimes are down. So what are Part 2 crimes? Part 2 crimes are drugs. It's basically everything else involved. Assaults, disorderly conduct, that type of thing. So as the population grows, you're going to have an increase in demand for calls for service. I think we all know that. And it may not all be Part 1 crimes. They may be other things. I mean, a lot of times people call the police department for anything, and we respond to it, and we try to be as helpful as we can. And a lot of times, it's not even a police matter, it's more of a civil matter, when we still go out there to try to deal with the situation. Well, that all takes time, and that, when you see in our calls for service, our calls for service have gone up about 11%. Now, is that a true accurate 11%? I don't know, because we're in a new CAD system. But we do think that there has been an increase. I don't think it's been that high.
Chief?
Yes.
Is some of the gap between the officers per 1,000 for the authorized versus trained, the folks that are in the academy, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes, that's correct.
So where do calls, people in distress or welfare sort of checks, some of the things we've had just in the last week or so on the bridge and the overpass, does that show up in Part 2, or is that not showing up anywhere in the stats?
It'll show up in the calls for service. Part 2 is a crime. So if it's a crime, it'll show up on our crime stats. If it's not a crime, it won't show up in there. It'll show as a call for demand. So a lot of those aren't crimes. Like if someone is threatening suicide, that's not a crime. Even though we will respond to that, we may take somebody into custody, we may transport them to the hospital to get medical attention. That is a call for service, but that's not considered a crime. So that won't be in the Part 1 or Part 2 crime categories.
Okay.
Also, one of the issues that we're having with our new system too is how we categorize injury collisions. If you have a collision and it doesn't have an injury, you're not required to call the police department. So the only thing we can track is when someone actually calls us. So usually when an injury occurs, that's when we respond. If they still call us when non-injury occurs, we'll still respond for that, but a lot of times, depending on what's going on, that's an easy, quick exchange of information. But one of the issues we have with our new system is our new system has a possible injury category, so it has an injury, possible injury, and non-injury. Our old system didn't have that. It was either injury or non-injury. Well, since we have that possible injury category, we've seen an increase in what we're showing for injury collisions, but I really can't tell you if that's an increase or not because the categories are different. So that's one of the issues we're having right now, trying to determine the validity of the stats. Though our overall collisions did go up last year, but we're showing a significant decrease this year compared to last year.
Chief, on this chart that talks about the alcohol-involved collisions, and do they take into account drug and marijuana?
Yes.
Use? That's
No, that's just straight alcohol. That does not have the other one in it.
So are those tracked at all, the drug and?
Yes,
and
yes, and there's an increase.
So then, Chief, with that 2.88, then that, it would only be accidents that are alcohol, so there would be actually more than that?
Well, 2.88 is injury. That's just an injury collision.
Oh, how many were?
So the ones that involve alcohol is down below. So when we had the .02, that was one. .05, I'd have to check on that, but that might be like 3. It's not that high of a number.
I gotcha. But have you seen an increase in traffic accidents, but not injury ones, but just traffic accidents?
Last year, we had an increase in overall collisions. But you have to remember that it's what's reported to us. So until they go through the state process, and the state's always behind, because they're required to do that, a lot of them will go to them, they don't even call us, so we don't even know that it occurred. So it's not, I think they're probably a couple years out, and it takes us that long to get that data in just to compare to where we're at to kind of get an idea.
Yeah, it just seems like I'm hearing more about accidents last several months, it seems.
This year they're down.
Okay.
Last year they were up though. So last year was one of our highest ones.
Oh, wow.
Parking lot accidents.
For parking lot?
They're way up.
Yeah, just intersection stuff.
In the marijuana store right next to me.
Oh, I think they did have one.
No, they had 7.
Oh.
Same guy had his car hit 7 times.
So when you look at calls for service, this is the one where we tried to normalize our old system. The old system would categorize any call as a call for service. So if the officer checked out at the station, if the officer checked out to go eat, if they checked out to use the restroom, it called it a call. So we tried to take all those out of there and then just use that data compared to the new system. So we're showing an 11% increase. I don't feel like it's been an 11% increase. I know it's increased. I just couldn't tell you what the number is. So until we go through the full year and in the following year, I should get some better data to be able to evaluate that. Now this is our accomplishments and challenges for the last year. So if you look at where we are now compared to where we were in 2012, we've had a 40% reduction in Part 1 crimes. Last year, we had a 3.9% reduction compared to the previous year. But currently, that's not our case. We're up 7% as of this week. Our main issues are stolen cars and car break-ins. And what usually drives that is drugs. And what happened last year? They took felony drug crimes and made them misdemeanors. So I thought we were going to see an increase with some of that, and I think we're starting to see it right now. Because a lot of the people who have been charged with felonies are now getting charged with misdemeanors for using the drugs. So their sentencing isn't going to be quite as harsh. They won't spend as much time in jail, and we're back on the street and we're dealing with this. It's not until they get multiple convictions before it becomes a felony before they'll actually have something a little bit more stringent on them.
Chief,
yes.
Other than the kudos for your team getting these reductions, these reductions materially affect any of the insurance rates or anything that the city gets or that affects your ratings to help?
I would think at some point when the insurance company checks and they're looking at the overall crime rate, that I think there would be some adjustment to that for your homeowners and stuff. There should be, and also for your vehicle comprehensive and stuff like that.
Thank you.
Let's see where we're at here. So that's kind of the issue we're having right now. And then the other issue I'm having is staffing. So I've got some injured officers. So what I had to do last year, I was able to bring back my street crimes detectives and my traffic officer and put them back to work in their positions. Starting next week, both one of my street crimes and my traffic officers going back to patrol to cover for staffing because we're short. So this year in December, we completed the construction of the new police building. We just did our final walkthrough last Wednesday. We have a couple of items that the construction company needs to fix, but then after that, it's primarily complete. And then we'll do our one-year walkthrough probably sometime in November so they can fix some of the last stuff at the end of the maintenance period. We also passed 2 new ordinances this year. One was for prohibited camping, and the other one is for the enhanced law enforcement area. The prohibited camping one is something that we really need because we're having a lot of issues, especially under the overpasses, and I'll show some pictures of that here in a little bit. And then the enhanced law enforcement area is basically the large portion of the Cara area. It goes from the one side of the hospital, because we didn't incorporate the hospital in there, all the way over to Pine, so the other side of the skate park, from the train station basically down to the river. Our crime there is about 20-some% higher for that area than it is in a lot of the area of the city. So our goal here is to try to reduce some of the people's ability to commit crimes in this area. So basically, once it was passed, it's 3 new crimes they have to commit. Once they get the conviction, then the judge will issue an order. It can issue an order from 3 months up to a year to not allow them to come back to this area. So anything from drug issues to trespassing to a lot of the other homeless issues that we wind up having, it'll be kind of all-encompassing. As of right now, we haven't had any yet. It'll take a while to get that to happen. I don't think there's going to be a lot of them on there. I bet the most will probably have 5 or 6, but those 5 or 6 will be the ones, when you look at the calls for service, there'll be a huge amount of calls for service. And I think that by the time one's actually done, when we've had them, by the time they get to the conviction stage, they'll have 20, 25 cases pending before we get to that point where this will probably be effective. See, I talked about the other one. I've always talked about, when we're looking at crimes, about having about 68, 69 officers on the department. It's kind of where I think we need to be, and I've been talking about that for the last few years. So as population grows, so will the number. So I'm thinking that we need 4 more officers. It'll give us 1 more per each patrol squad, so it'll give us 10 in each squad, which will alleviate me from having to, anytime somebody gets hurt or something happens, I have to pull somebody out of a specialty unit and put them back in patrol. Because once I pull them out of specialty units, they can't concentrate on some of the high crime areas that we're having issues with, then you could see our crime rate going back up again, like we're seeing right now.
Terry?
Any questions?
You showed these shifts from 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. and how many consecutive days are those? Do they go 5 days, 4 days, 3 days on those shifts?
No, basically what it is the officer is assigned to the 7 to 7 shift, so he's assigned at night from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So instead of coming in at 7 p.m., they're going to come in at 3 p.m. So from that same squad, 2 officers will work 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. So they're just coming in early.
But how many days?
7 days a week.
7 days a week?
Yeah, 7 days a week. But it's not the same officers. It rotates. So they're rotating the same schedule as their squad does. So we work 12-hour shifts. So we're on see, they work 2, off 2, work 3, off 2, work 2, off 3.
Wow.
Yes.
The 4 new officers that you need, this law levy that's on the ballot currently, does that have any factor in this?
The county.
That's for Lynn County.
Yeah, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Your pocketbook.
Okay, so I'll go over what my code compliance stuff did. As Seth and Jorge talked about, I am part of the CARA output. And as people have started to find out about my position, my call loads increased quite substantially. Currently, I have about 55 calls holding. So I get through them as fast as I can, but sometimes that's pretty hard because when the worst houses come up that have, like today I'm dealing with one that has 121 calls within the last 2 years, it takes some time to get through that process and make sure that we're going to get a good outcome that will be a long-standing outcome and not just a Band-Aid. So that puts the priorities ahead of all the other complaints, so sometimes it builds up. As the chief talked about, we did implement 4 new ones. 2 were new, and 2 were modified. The modified ones were parking, which aligned with downtown to $35, and then we had a large issue, some of which brought crime into the area of abandoned vehicles, quote unquote, where people would park vehicles that were inoperable or unregistered and live in them, and we had a few areas down by LBCC and throughout the town where these were also associated with rising crime rates in those areas. So one of the ways we could get rid of those is to post them as abandoned, but as the code was written, if we posted them and they moved even 6 inches, we'd have to repost them. Well, if they're in that current condition, we could tow them within 30 days of the original posting, which actually cleared out that one down by LBCC, which was nice. I've started to work as part of the enhancement. Council sessions went, I'm sure some of you saw them, there was a lot of outcry for more of a joining between resources and the PD. So I've started to work with them about trying to find that link to where we can make a better impact and hopefully steer people away from getting ever kicked out of that zone. Hopefully change that habit before that happens, which a lot of people are asking for. And we're still working on that. I'm working with CSC and Chance currently, and a few other groups have shown interest, so just trying to get that kind of action plan involved. Then last year, we went through 18 different areas with abatements and remedies. That goes from mowing yards that are vacated. I have a few in town that are people that live in Atlanta, New York, that just have left their property here, and people calling constantly about, all the way to drug houses where we've kicked people out of and boarded up because of the conditions and crime that has been brought into the area. So it ranges quite drastically between the two. But there's 18 areas that we've spent our abatement funds on to bring that about. And then also assisted planning and development with a few of their code things that would not be resolved without a little more enforcement and changing some of their coding. I'm just going to go over 3 different properties that were a pretty big issue and have been issues, some of them before I even started here. This one, if some of you guys know, we'll have 705 3rd and 221 Thurston. About 2 years ago, a male was pulled out of 705 3rd. It's at about a 3-inch lean, or it was at a 3-inch lean. You couldn't even go upstairs without worrying about falling through the floor, and it was being rented out kind of slumlord style to this guy who had some mental issues. He ended up being taken care of, and other state agencies came in and brought him into proper housing. And the other one in the front wasn't as bad as condition, but pretty bad. It had a lot of asbestos wiring issues, and it was kind of Frankenstein together into this hazardous building. So they were kind of put on notice, and eventually they sold it, and the photo on the right there is kind of how it stands now. If you drive by there, it's vacant. They're planning on building new structures there. I think they've gone through the planning process now and are supposedly starting here soon. 810 Line, which is just up the street here. We had a lot of calls from the depot and Sidekicks and Hasty Freeze and them about people constantly going into this location. It's vacant currently. It's been vacant for a little while. But we had a lot of people sleeping on the patio, breaking in, sleeping inside. That's the garage on the left-hand side, or sorry, the top panels are the garage and how it was. A lot of
So
drug
Chris,
prevail.
this is the one that's behind Awesome and then next to the depot?
Yes.
The historic one that sits back. It's been vacant for a long time.
Yes.
I didn't know people were breaking into it.
Yeah, the depot,
That's a
they had
nice
called me about
house.
4 times in a week about people breaking into the garage.
Has it been more recent?
This was about less than a month ago, I think. If maybe a month ago tops, but yeah, not too long ago.
Sell that place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was able to get a hold of the owner believe out of Corrales, they came down and they boarded up the window that had been broken out to gain access from the inside, which is good, and then they put it on the latch that you can't access the screws. A lot of people buy the ones that you could access the screws because they're cheaper, and obviously they come with screwdrivers and then they just get back in. So not a hard process to think out. But we haven't had any issues since then at that location, which has been nice, and I've talked to the people in them, and nothing has come about, which is great. This house has been an issue well before I started this position, well before I started at the PD. It's up in North Albany, 915 and 923 Jones. There's 3 family members that live on this property with varying mental issues and drug issues. The neighbors in this area had contacted me a little while ago, and they contacted pretty much everyone in the city because their neighbors, the brothers were feuding and were putting up signs, buy drugs down this driveway, do this, and the one brother set all his other brother's kids' stuff on fire by the tree. It was just becoming quite chaotic. So I got involved with that. We've had hundreds and hundreds of calls there within the past 5 years. I think it was like, oh man, it was about 400 something calls. I can't remember. Anyways, I got in hold of the mother who lives out of state, and every now and then gets notice of this. They are being evicted. They're actually out in 2 days is their end of eviction. The mother plans on selling the property. The buildings on it really aren't salvageable, even though she's lived there. She was born there. But the plan is to evict them. She's wanting to sell it because she just wants to enjoy her retirement, not to deal with me anymore. And hopefully somebody will build a nice home there. So that's pretty much it on that one.
So talking about our proposed budget, we have an increase of 4.6%, but when we first got our budget numbers, there was not enough money in the budget to fund this year. So we had a 10% increase in the levy, but because we had contract negotiations last year, and after the contract negotiation was completed, the budget process was already done. So I did not get anything extra allocated into my budget for this year. We talked about it, and we were going to try to float it to see how we were doing, because usually we give money back every year, to see if we can incorporate the changes into the new budget. So I think that was one of the reasons you'll see a large increase, especially in personal services and employee benefits from one year to the other. The other one is that we also had an increase because the association agreed to go to the new health insurance program. In order to get them on the new health insurance program, for the first year, the city agreed to pay the full amount of their deductible, which was $4,000, which was upfronted to them. But when you look over the cost of the contract for over the 3-year period, it was going to be a reduction. So I took a huge hit this year to my budget. Well, because none of that extra money was in my budget, when I got my budget numbers and the percentage increase, it didn't increase a higher amount, it increased amount that didn't have those changes in there, hence I was short money. So when we looked at it, what we did, so when you look at the levy, normally on the levy, we used to always have 9 positions. Last year, the levy grew enough, I was able to add a 10th position to it. Well, this year, what I had to do is I had to take 2 positions off of the general fund and move them to the levy so I could balance the budget. And what I did in the levy is I reduced the amount that I was normally allocating to equipment replacement so that I could take the money that I already have saved up in equipment replacement to cover some of my ongoing costs that I use for vehicles. Because a lot of our vehicles that we have in the police department are on lease. So I have lease payments that I have to pay every year. So that's coming out of my equipment replacement fund, but I used that so that I could balance the budget this year. One thing that I have asked the city manager and finance is that if I do have any savings this year, that the amount that we had to dip in order to cover this year's budget, if I could get that back, which is about $200,000. So when you look at the positions here, as far as the largest increases, personal services is $607,000. When you look at materials and services, Software license fees went up $29,000, and that was for the new CAD RMS system. Power and light for the new building, we haven't been in there for a full year. We do have solar panels in there. Don't know how much that's going to save us until we go through a good summer. So we added $20,000 to that. We also, before, we weren't paying for, if you see a new line item in there for gas, because our old building didn't have gas, well, the new building has gas, so we had to allocate money for that. And then, because it is a larger building, we have an increase in telephone fees, administrative service and IT services were also a good increase for us. And then the largest reduction is also in equipment replacement. And then when you look at this slide here for the levy, it's in personal service, and also in equipment replacement was our largest reduction in order to get the budget to balance. One of the things that was brought up when we were doing the enhanced law enforcement zone proposal is a lot of the issues that we have in the parks, especially along the Dave Clark Trail, and then some of the issues that we're having in that area in Tequina Landing, and then over by Bowman Park. A lot of the people that were coming up were wanting us to expand the zone. They wanted us to increase the zone to the other side of Bowman Park, because of all the issues and stuff we're having there. So one of the things that I've been talking about probably for the last few years is one thing I'm used to that we had in Arizona is we had a park ranger. And the job of the park ranger was to be in the parks, making sure, people were doing what they're supposed to be doing, conducting themselves appropriately. We have a lot of land here in Albany, and we just don't have enough park staff to be out there all the time to make sure the stuff's getting cleaned up. So when and I'll go back to this slide in a minute. So when you look at some of these slides here that I put in here, look at, and this has been cleaned up since 4/20, but when we went out there, this is all the stuff that was under the bridge. And when you look over Swanson Park, on the park path, this is all the stuff that was over there. And then under the bridge, we've got graffiti, we've had people sleeping there. So that was one of the big pushes that we have for the ordinance change, to give the patrol officer a little bit of enforcement capability to do something about some of the issues we're having. And then the new one that I just added that's not in your packet was Tequina Landing. That one we had quite a bit. That was about, I think it's about 1.5 miles to 2 miles in on the trail is where this was located. So most of this stuff's, I'm not sure about this one, but I think most of this has been cleaned up. We've issued citations that we can issue, but that's something that when we go back here and we talk about the park ranger, that I think a park ranger can do. Because a park ranger wouldn't be a sworn position, it would be a civilian position. It would be somebody who could issue citations for city code violations, kind of like our civilian service officers. So what I did on here is I put on 2 different positions. So the top one is a community service officer position, which we already have now. We currently have 4 of them. And those are paid through, 3 of them are paid through the levy. And then the other one is a park ranger position. And where I got the cost estimate for the park ranger position here was from Portland, because that was about the only one that I could find that would be comparable to something that we would do here. This isn't anything we have money for now. I'm putting this out saying this is something we need, and at some point we probably need to find money for this. Now the question is going to be, where is the best place for this person to reside? Should they work for the Parks Department or should they work for the Police Department? One of the issues we have here is in the wintertime, because of the weather, is there going to be enough work for a park ranger during the wintertime? So one of my proposals is I have the staffing for the supervision, for the training, and we could also issue them a radio and have them on our CAD RMS system, so that if there's ever an issue, we can come out and help. We could provide them, backup if they need it, those types of things. And I was trying to think outside the box a little bit on how we would make this work, that if we funded it at a CSO, which is our civilian service officer, and we changed the job description a little bit, and we created one that added park ranger duties into it. And what that would entail, and I copied some of this out of the city of Portland, would be somebody who patrols assigned parks on foot, bicycle, and or vehicle, provides a positive presence, promotes enjoyment of the park, and voluntary compliance with park rules. information to park patrons about park history, scheduled activities and rules, codes and hours, and other general information. Also somebody who enforces park codes and rules, interprets and communicates park codes and rules to the public, issues warnings, exclusions, and citations, and act as a deterrent to park code violations. So I think it would give us more of a presence in those areas and deter some of the issues that we're having now. Because I mean, we try to get down there as much as we can, but with my staffing level and the way the crime rate's going, I just don't have the manpower to go down there all the time to try to deal with it. And I don't think you need a sworn officer for this. I think you can pay somebody less in order to do this job, but still provide them that backup if they need it. So the first year cost we estimated for a CSO at a step A with equipment is about $137,000. That includes a vehicle, which would give them a truck, the computer, it includes radios, it includes taser, includes uniforms, those types of things. And then when you look at the cost difference between a park ranger position that we took from Portland, you're only talking, $5,000 difference, something like that. So it's not that much of a difference. Then that way, when they're not busy doing the park ranger stuff, we could have them do CSO work and help the community that way too.
So Chief, or Peter even, could we start a parking lot, list, sort of, putting this item on to fund, and then we could see as we get through all the programs, if there's something that we saw that was more cost sharing or whatever we could do to be able to look at adding this position. Is the Budget Committee okay with starting a little list of what we could look at when we get through all the programs? Okay, all right. Thank you.
Yeah, Chief, and you weren't here at the time, and all I can think of is Dick and Sharon. When we first went out for the levy, didn't we have a park ranger in it? Okay, I wasn't crazy then.
It was 2002, and we did fund for the park ranger, but it was to be kind of, not through the police department, then it was going to be funding with the park, and it was just never really enough money that came through to fully implement. So
I think Ben Arthur, one of our current officers, was our last park ranger that they did on a trial program. And I was told it lasted about 6 months or so.
Yeah.
And then that was about it.
So that was in 2002, and that,
But it was through the levy that they were going to fund it, and so that just kind of went away.
So the community really said they did want that when they voted for the levy. They, were in support of a park ranger, because we had a lot of park issues back then, remember? Yeah.
So we're kind of not doing what we said we were going to do, and so I think this is important to do.
Well, we did, but it didn't last, yeah.
But we're not doing it.
Scott, did you want to ask your question before Ed?
Okay.
I did ask one.
Sure.
Okay.
Could I add something to that? No, I don't. I'm not going to be here for I'll be back later. I just wanted, Sharon, that position was a half-time park ranger position.
Okay.
And the big issue was trying to find somebody for a half-time job. That wasn't really going to work out, and so we then tried to find other solutions, but in the end, it was just abandoned. It just wasn't an effective way to pursue it.
Okay, great.
And Mario was
But I do think it's a good reason to have it through the police department, though, to be able to have that connection, with backup officers.
Yeah. Well, I figured that way, they're on our radio system, we know where they are, they check off on the radio when they're out there. If there's an issue, all they have to do is say something, and we can provide more support.
Exactly. Great idea.
Great.
They wouldn't be armed or anything like that?
No, just self-defense. So they would have a taser, they would probably have OC spray, but that's it, and they would have some training associated with that.
So Chief, you talked about thinking outside the box, and then based on what Ed just said, who wants to work just part-time?
This is for a full-time.
No, I understand, but, maybe another option, somebody part-time. But my point is, I had the thought the other day, what do school bus drivers do during the day? They do nothing. They drive in the morning, they drive in the afternoon. There's a whole bunch of people there that maybe they'd work 4 hours a day driving around the parks. Just an idea.
Yeah.
Great idea. Okay.
system.
Are there any,
They haven't had a job.
I think that concludes it. Any questions?
Kudos to you, because I had tabbed and highlighted some of the things on your line items, and you covered basically every single one of them, like from the details. And I saw the power and light and the equipment replacement, which is concerning because of, Peter's elimination, first thing. But on page 124 of our budget packet, your vehicle fuel charges, actually, it's a $500 drop, which is not, we're not talking dollars at all, but are your vehicles getting more efficient, or is that just trying to balance your?
We typically overestimate our vehicle fuel charges because we don't know what it is. And since we're having budget constraints, we're trying to limit some of that we could.
On page 177, the DOJ equitable sharing, it shows a proposed $90,000 beginning balance.
127, page 127.
Page 127, yeah. 49905, account number.
Any of the stuff for the equitable sharing is us estimating we might bring in during the year. So it's not actual funds that we have, but this one.
It's a huge jump, so I was wondering where it was coming.
Well, we just had a case where we brought in, remember how much it was? Over $100,000.
Okay, so.
But, but it's not on here yet, so that's for the projection for it.
That's just anticipated what the income will be from that?
Correct, we already have it now.
Oh, you already have it? Okay,
Yes.
so, okay.
It's just not in this sheet.
Okay.
So that's some of the problems with some of these equitable sharing ones, because basically it's off our RICO stuff, so depending what we're able to seize, and then most of our stuff, we usually take it through the federal system, where it's an 80-20 split, so we get 80% of what was seized. That comes back to the department to use. This was off a case that we did in Salem. There was ties down to here that led us up there. We ended up taking someone down and ended up arresting him for that, and then we found money in a couple different stash houses that he had.
So it'll, next budget cycle, it'll show probably how then what the actual expenses were for that, and it'll offset, I'm guessing.
Correct.
Just okay, good,
But
thank you.
we only spend what we take in.
Yeah.
So we look, I don't even really look at that, that's just kind of budget capacity. I look at what our exact amount is that we have in there, and that's what we're allowed to use.
Thank you.
Bessie?
On page 129, it's the line 61090, the line task force. It went down $10,000, and I just wondered, are we not paying as much, or is somebody else kicking in more? Or is it just startup costs were so much and this is less?
It's under asset forfeiture.
Yeah.
Asset forfeiture.
Are you talking about the revenue?
It's on 129.
Yeah, asset forfeiture. Yeah.
Under materials and services.
That's what they spent it on.
Yeah.
This is where they got it, that's where they spent it.
Spent so far, again, the estimate of what we think.
You think, okay, all right. All right, thank you.
And that's our state asset forfeiture. Most of the stuff that we use with lines is going to be through the other program, through the federal.
Yeah.
Because we get it, and it also going to depend on the amount, and it depends on how the case was initially initiated. But most of our stuff through line will be through the federal one.
Okay, great, thank you.
Question, and it might be for Gina, an explanation again on how the central service charges are calculated and why yours are going up 84,000.
We had more central service charges this year, well, for the next fiscal year. One of the things that finance is doing is we're implementing a new financial system. Everyone been doing this. We have backfilled Ann's position with a temporary, so that's part of the budget this year. She's going to be focused on the software implementation. We have also tried to build some reserves into that this year.
What Peter had mentioned with the City Hall reserves to start saving for repairs and maintenance on City Hall, the main thing being the HVAC system. And then there was also a transfer. We are now paying for our current ERP system costs. It used to be in the IT budget, and it's now in our budget, so that's part of the increase as well.
Let me rephrase the question then. Is the central service charge is calculated as an example on the number of employees in that department or square footage of the building in that department?
It depends on what portion of the charge. Payroll costs for the payroll staff get charged out to the departments based on the number of employees that they have. The building charges, which aren't in the central service charges, those are charged by the square footage that the department occupies within City Hall. Overhead gets allocated by operating budget.
Well, I guess I'm still not very clear, and again, just curious why it went up 84,000 as an example, to have something to do with the new police station. I see the fires went up as well.
No, it's because their budgets are fairly large. They get allocated more of HR, city manager, and finances overhead costs.
Well, so an example, the HR cost, that would make sense if you have more employees. So that type of thing would make sense to me. But it sounds like it's a mixture of a lot of different things. It's not just strictly crunching numbers, how many people or how many square
No,
feet.
and we try to allocate specific costs to specific activities of the department. And those costs for us that we can associate to a specific activity, we call it overhead, and then that's allocated by the department's operating budget. We take out capital in here.
Do the department heads have input into, for lack of a better description, negotiating what their fair share is of central services?
Formula.
She said it, the formula.
Omnipotent
No, it was the John Stahl formula. Do you remember that, Bill? We always it was his formula that he came up with years ago, so.
And it's still.
We used to joke around about John Stahl's formula.
So I will say that is one of the things that we're going to be taking a look at this summer in preparation for the new biennial budget, is we're going to take a look at the way we currently allocate costs for central service charges. One of the departments is going to be getting a new cost allocation software that we're going to be able to use, and so we'd like to take advantage of that and really evaluate what we are charging and why we're charging it, and how we're allocating it.
I understand, there's a total, and it has to get allocated out across everybody, so if one's going to go up, somebody else is going to go down. Okay.
Well, probably this year, everybody's just gone up a little bit.
Is there, do you guys have the microphone back there to pass around to staff that aren't up front here? Don't we have the little, just to make sure that people watching off-site can hear? Thanks.
When you take a look at the cost bill, I know you're identifying 84,100, but if you go back to the public levy portion, there's another 33,800, and that's 117, almost 118,000. That's almost the difference in what he's had to remove from their capital replacement fund. So, and IT services went up as well, another 25,000. So they're taking a huge hit for a lot of central services, if you add both budgets. I mean, it's $125,000 in 1 year.
That's almost your park ranger.
Well, that was the software thing, or in IT that was purchased? Yeah. Yeah, under IT's increase, you had that software. system.
Use the mic.
It's a short microphone. A little closer.
It's a calculation based on the number of PCs. They have a larger facility, they have more PCs, more officers, so that's how the cost is allocated. And then we distribute among the number of PCs that we have throughout the city. We could do it, you can do it multiple ways. We could do it based on how much CPUs, how much storage. We decided to make it simple and do it based on number of PCs instead of number of FTEs or anything like that.
Chief?
Yes.
So the number of sworn officers in the budget is 65?
Correct.
And then 69 is where you'd like to be?
Yes.
And then you've got the park ranger position. If you had 69, would you still want the park ranger, or would you have one of your 69 not be sworn and be the park ranger?
Well, the reason for having this, the 69 was to add one more person to each of the patrol squads. So I'd have to bring one patrol squad short if I was only going to have the 3.
Okay. And do you know your cost per sworn officer? So to have those 4 officers is how much?
Approximately $140,000.
Okay. And do we know, right now with compression, how many dollars the levy's losing in the current finances talking behind you? Do we know?
What compression is?
Well, how the impact on the police department due to compression this year?
Well, so overall, we only lost about $234 to compression, according to taxes for that. If you look at the local option levy, we actually went from a negative 929,000 to a negative, I actually brought this because I thought somebody might ask about compression. To a negative 651,000. So we actually gained about 300,000 for the local option levy for the current 17-18 tax year. We don't have the numbers for the 18-19 one yet. We're only estimating those.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Any other further questions? No? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Folden and Budget Committee. My name is John Bradner. I'm the Fire Chief of the Albany Fire Department, and I'm pleased to present the budget report for 2018-2019 to you tonight. I too want to spend just a second and thank you for your time on this. I realize Council, it sounds like you've been here a number of hours, so I'll try and make efficient use of your time. But I do really appreciate each and every one of you taking the time out of your days or out of your day to take a look at what we're doing, to get updated on our departments, because for me personally, I use this as an opportunity to let you know what's going on, so that way you know that the money that is being spent on the fire department is money well spent. And so I appreciate the opportunity to get in front of you and to present the budget and have you guys then ask questions about it. I also want to take a second to thank the group, and I think the third row back there, that's the management team, or the majority of the management team for the Albany Fire Department. I appreciate all the effort that they put into getting the budget to this point, but I really appreciate the work that they do day in and day out to make sure that we're making a safer community for our current generation and then future generations of people who live in Albany. So I really appreciate all the work that they do. Our budget process, like I tell you every year, it starts in January, and it starts from the first line supervisors who are out actually doing the work. They start submitting their budget requests. They fill those out and turn those in by the end of January. February, they start getting looked at from the division chiefs up to the assistant chief, and then obviously I get involved and get it to this point. So I appreciate everybody in the department and all the work that they put into getting our budget to this point as well. So I wanted to start off with a slide of Station 11. I really appreciate the community supporting our department and getting us to the point that we could get rid of that old station. I was thinking about that the other day, and I was thinking about, all the seismic issues that we had, all the mold issues, space issues, and what a nice facility we're in, and really appreciate the community's support in that. Like Chief Latanzio, I'm going to follow a similar format, some different slides, but similar format as last year. Changed some things up to maybe give you a different look or a different view at some of the items that I talk about, and I'll start off with, sorry about that. Start off with the area that we cover. Every year I always tell you that we cover 81 square miles of fire protection. What does that mean? So this map, and by the way, each of you should have a handout in front of you. So if you're not able to see the screen, you've got the handout there as well. So this map is the city of Albany in yellow there with the red streets. Those streets are emergency travel routes. We have designated travel routes that we take to avoid railroad tracks, to safely and quickly get to emergencies. And so those are our travel routes throughout the community. But the yellow there in the center is the city of Albany. The green to both the east and west is Albany Rural Fire Protection District, one of our 3 fire protection districts that surround us that contract with the city of Albany for fire protection services. The pink in North Albany is North Albany Rural Fire Protection District. And then the teal, I guess, up to the top there is Palestine Rural Fire Protection District. Our boundaries go clear up to the Polk County line. As you're heading out Spring Hill and head over to Independence Highway, we go just past that location. As you can see to the east, we go out to the Santiam River. Sanderson's Bridge out there is part of our area. And then obviously halfway to Corvallis, halfway over to Lebanon, and other areas as such.
Doesn't it include Millersburg now, too?
This map here includes a portion of Millersburg, but we are adding in July 1st. I'll talk more about that in just a minute. Our ambulance response area is significantly larger than our fire districts at 205 square miles. And this map, hopefully you can see that okay, the yellow in the center makes up our ambulance response area or ambulance service area. Albany is in pink up at the top, and the tangent kind of in the middle of the screen, and then Halsey down at the lower end of the screen. We've got a long, thin, narrow district there. The state of Oregon is divided up into many ambulance service areas, and because not every department, Halsey doesn't have a transporting ambulance, and so they've set it up by each county as to who's covering which area, and then this is our area here that we cover, and it makes up a total of 205 square miles. The bottom boundary, if you're ever heading down Highway 99 and you're leaving Halsey and you go by Cartney Road, that's our boundary. Cartney Road is in our district, and the other side of Cartney Road is outside of our district. So that's a ways down there. It's definitely quite a little haul. Councilor Kopczynski referred to expansion into Millersburg, and this is that's one of our items that we're working on in this coming year. We've been working with the council on this over the last few months, handful of months or so. City of Millersburg has come to the fire department and requested us to take over the rest of providing fire services into the northern half of Millersburg. This map is Millersburg, the bottom portion, or most of the bottom portion, and all of that's in pink there. That's currently in Albany Rural's Fire Protection District, and then the northern half, and the line in the middle is Conser, and basically the northern half currently is in Jefferson Rural Fire Protection District. Millersburg has decided they're going to pull out of both of those districts, and they wanted to, as a city, contract with one entity. So starting July 1st, we'll be providing protection, not just to the southern half, but also the northern half of the entire city of Millersburg. Millersburg is in turn then paying us a rate based on their assessed value, and then that rate will then be used to hire additional personnel to be able to put at a station in Millersburg. Ultimately, their goal is to have a station out there. Initially, probably sometime shortly after July, maybe a little bit later in the summer, early fall, they'll have a temporary fire station out there that'll be there for a few years until they can develop a design and actually build a permanent station. So they're working on that. Their funds will pay for that. It's nothing that we'll budget for as far as a station, but they will contribute money toward our budget to be able to pay for the personnel and then the associated equipment with those personnel.
Chief, is the map accurate? Is Love's, the new Love's inside that hyphenated area up in the top right corner?
That is in the city of, the city of Millersburg.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
So I want to talk a little bit about emergency responses. I talk about that every year, and for the last handful plus of years, that number has gone up every single year. That was true again in 2017. Our 911 calls per service were recorded at 9,477, so just a little bit shy of 9,500 calls. It's a 1-year increase, you can see there, of 11.8% and a 5-year increase of 48.8%. So significant increase and ever increasing, it seems like, call volume with our emergency calls. Of those calls, nearly 8,000 were EMS calls, so that's predominantly what we do. Roughly 85% of the calls we go on are EMS calls, and you can see the one in the 5-year increase there. And then I just think it's an interesting fact to throw in there, but we transported over 5,600 patients to the hospital last year. So a significant number of patients that we're taking every single day and transporting to the hospital. So I'll get back to the emergency responses and the increase here in just a couple minutes and a couple slides. But I wanted to spend just a minute and talk about other department activities, because we're not just emergency responses. We do a lot more than just respond to fires and respond to medical calls. We really, and if you remember my budget message from last year, we really tried to focus on this current year on community risk reduction. And our goal was to do what we could to improve the safety of our community, and like I said at the beginning, not only for this current generation, but also future generations. So it's hard to go through some of these items and pick one or two things, but I've picked a couple. Please don't think that that's all that we're doing in community risk reduction. There's a lot more things that are going on, but I did want to highlight a few things. One is that we started a program in, I think it was March of this year, where we're going into the middle schools and we're training 8th graders in how to perform CPR, how to do CPR, and then the operation of an AED. Albany Public Safety Foundation started, and they said that they wanted to fund that. So they actually paid for the cost of the supplies and the overtime for our personnel, and actually food for them, to feed them as well. But to go out and to spend 4 days going to each of the 4 middle schools, and then spending 45 minutes with each and every 8th grader that was there, teaching them how to do CPR, having them get down on their hands and knees and actually perform it, and then how to operate an AED. I was telling this to somebody the other day. I've been in Albany about 29 years now, and in my time, one of the things that I've noticed that's really made a transition in the last just handful of years, it seems like, is our cardiac arrest saves. When I started my career, when you went on a cardiac arrest, it was rare that you would save a life. And now lately, we could, between the group back there and myself, we could probably come up with a good half dozen stories that have occurred of cardiac arrest saves, valid saves, where the individuals are walking out of the hospital. A number of them are coming in here in front of the council, and the people that do CPR on them are getting recognized with life-saving awards. And it's really neat to see. And somebody asked me, I was telling them about this, they said, "Why? What's made the difference?" Well, what's made the difference is more people out there doing public bystander CPR, and more AEDs out there in the community, public access AEDs that anybody can go get and operate. They're very easy to operate, and we teach it to 8th graders, so anybody can learn how to operate one. But it's really making a difference. We are limited in what we can do. Based on where we're located at, we're not right there when that cardiac arrest happens, but bystanders are there. Bystanders are willing to jump in. CPR, they've taught hands-only CPR now, so you're not having to give mouth-to-mouth to somebody, and it's really made a difference, and it's really saving lives. And so we as a department want to grab onto that excuse me, in any way we can, and see what we can do to keep saving more and more lives, because that's part of the community risk reduction that we think is really valuable. So training those 8th graders is something that we'll do year in and year out. The goal is to get to the point where the vast majority of your community knows how to do CPR, and if somebody drops, somebody's there. They learned it hopefully when they were an 8th grader, and they're able to do CPR and save a life. Another event that we did as a department that ties right in with community risk reduction is we hosted the first ever Willamette Valley Heart Screening. We had one of our paramedic firefighters that went to a conference and learned about an outfit out of Texas. I think they're called Who We Play For, and they go around to different locations in the United States, and they do a 12-lead EKG. For $20, they'll come in and they'll do 12-lead EKGs on student athletes is who they target. But really, it's anyone between the ages of, I think it was 11 and 24. And so this year we held the first one. It was actually, is my understanding, it was the first one in the state of Oregon for this group at least. And we held it out at South Albany High School. It was, I think, 4 hours long. We advertised it to all the schools and any place we could advertise it. And throughout that day, we had 87 kids that came in and paid $20, their parents paid $20 for a 12-lead EKG. That information is sent back to a doctor in Texas who then reviews it and says, yeah, there's no anomalies, everything looks good, or no, there's something going on. You might want to follow up on this. Out of those 87 kids that were screened in that event, 3 kids were referred on to a cardiologist. One of them, as I've been told, actually had a pretty serious heart condition that was CAI that they didn't know about, and they were actually able to then get treatment and follow-up care because of that. So another thing that we're doing, and we will continue to do that I believe will make a difference in this community. So really excited about that community risk reduction or those activities, and want to keep those going in the future. On the fire code side, our fire and life safety division, we conducted, I believe it's probably a record, at least for probably my time as chief, but conducted over 1,700 occupancy inspections, where we're getting out there to the business community and going through and inspecting it for fire code violations. On those inspections, they corrected over 2,000 fire hazards or fire code violations. Those were issues that could have started a fire. And sometimes it's as simple as an extension cord that shouldn't be there, but sometimes it's maybe more serious, a blocked exit, or hazardous materials stored incorrectly. But that's a lot of hazards and a lot of fires or potential fires that we were able to prevent in the community. So I'm very excited about that as well. During this last year, we hired a new city emergency manager. Chuck Perino started in that position, and he had a number of successes as well, working in that capacity. One of them that we just got actually through the council here within the last month or so is we updated the city's emergency operations plan. And it's I don't know how many pages, probably 250, 300 probably page document that really kind of tells us what to do when the big one happens. And not that we're going to go, open the page, but it allows us to plan and prepare and to be ready for those big events before they occur. So something that as a community we update every 5 years. And so it was time to do that again. Chuck came in with a new set of eyes and worked through that, and very, very happy with the effort that he put into that, and to get to the point that we've got an updated plan. Our emergency manager works very collaboratively with Lynn County's emergency manager. City of Corvallis just hired a new emergency manager position, and other emergency managers throughout the region and throughout the state. One of the things that Chuck was able to do is he was able to assist with securing grants for the Lynn County Sheriff Office for $466,000. They were able to buy a robot, a drone, and then I believe an armored vehicle as well. They can be used in our community. It's not with Albany Police Department, but still it's a grant that Lynn County Sheriff's Office was able to secure. And so very pleased that he was able to work collaboratively with them to benefit our local community. Ambulance billing and collections, I want to report just a couple things on that. In this current year, so the fiscal year that ends June 30th of this year, our ambulance billers will invoice just over $8 million in ambulance invoices and ambulance charges for the year. They will only collect just a little over $3 million. And the big reason for that is federal mandates as far as where capitation is at, how much Medicare will pay, Medicaid, will pay. We can charge whatever amount we want, but there's limitations as to what they will pay, what the federal government will pay on those Medicare claims. A large number of patients that we go on, typically just right at about 60% of our patients are Medicare patients, and so there is limitations on a significant population that we transport. So that's why there's such a significant difference between what we invoice and what we collect. Having said that, they will collect over $3 million that'll come back into the city in this current year, which is the first time we'll actually have gone over $3 million. Last year, as you'll see on another slide, the previous year, they collected $2.8 million. This year, I think it's going to be about $3.1 million. So that, with our increased call volume, that generates additional revenue, additional invoices, and so very, very pleased with the effort and the work that they put in.
What's the strategy of charging $8 million and only collecting $3 million? Why not just charge what'll actually get paid?
Because for the 40%, the other 40%, I guess, you more typically do get the full 100%, or at least something close to it, depending on the insurance company and co-pays, and then firemen, which I'll talk about here in a minute. So you almost have to set the rates knowing that you're writing off a good portion, but you need that additional on the 40% in order to cover your costs.
Chief, how does FireMed affect that?
FireMed, we track that every year because there is monies that we're writing off, and it takes me into my next point there of the FireMed program. $65 a year.
Fabulous program.
Yeah, then anybody get transported, we'll bill insurance company, but we won't charge the individual for any out-of-pocket expenses as well. So we track how much we write off, because there's a portion that we write off if there was a copay or if it was a single payer, the individual had to pay themselves. So we track that, but then we also track how much money we're bringing in with FireMed. And, probably 3 or 4 years ago now, we had to up the membership rate from $50 to $65. Our EMS chief just talked to me recently and said, we're going to have to watch that again this year. Those lines may come closer to crossing, and we may end up coming back at some point in time saying, we need to increase that rate. But for now, we're okay on that.
So, Chief, how close are we to when we're dealing with a fire call or a ambulance call? We have a cost of doing business that goes out there. We're taking a loss on most of the Medicare folks. What does the people that we're charging full rate for, how does that compare to our cost? In private industry, if I charge you more than him, I go to prison. If I'm making up
So we charge everybody the same amount. We have to charge everybody the same amount by Medicare rules. We can't say, okay, you're going to pay this much, you're going to pay that much. Where the difference is what they reimburse and how much they reimburse.
Well, my question though is, how does the amount that we charge compare to what our cost is?
What's that? Is it covering the cost? It's a really good question. A number of years ago, we were seeing a decrease in the revenue, and actually where we got to the point that we are today was that we were having to continually transfer money into the ambulance fund to cover it when we had a separate ambulance fund. And probably 4 or 5 years ago, working with Stuart Taylor, we decided, okay, that doesn't make sense to keep doing that. Let's just transfer it all into the general fund, and those revenues will come in. Since that time, interestingly enough, our revenues have continued to go up. to the point that we have each year, over the last probably 3 years, brought in more revenue than we anticipated, we or finance together anticipated. As far as having an exact dollar amount that says, okay, this call costs $2,000 and we're charging $1,200 or $1,500, I don't have that calculation in front of me. But it is something that we do pay attention to as far as are we able, what is occurring with our revenue, and is that going up and is that helping contribute, or are we having to contribute more money from the general fund to support that side of our operations?
I guess there are a number of times when you take a unit out that you don't charge anything because you don't transport. And some of those folks are the I've fallen and I can't get up. Have you implemented yet the charge to whomsoever for going out there even though you don't transport? You charge them for going out and actually doing the work?
So what you're referring to is the charge to the assisted living facilities that we instituted.
Or the individual who is being helped up.
Yeah, about a year and a half ago, we came to the council and said, okay, this is a concern, this is a problem, we need to have a fee in there. It was interesting, and with fees like that, and our fire line fee is another fee we have, we don't want to assess that, but we need that hammer if we need to assess it. So what occurred was then our EMS chief was able to go out to those assisted living facilities and actually meet with the staff and meet with whoever was in charge and explain to them, okay, here's what you're doing, this is the problem it's creating for us, we now have the means, the method to be able to charge you for that, and if you continue to do this, we educated. We decided we wanted to educate first. And so, and I didn't bring the numbers with me, but I don't know if Kyle remembers or not, but was that a 9-month period of time?
Almost a full year.
Almost a full year's period of time, when we actually looked at the target audience that we're trying to target, the assisted living facility. So not the senior facility that's independent living for seniors, but actually the ones where they're paying as part of an assisted living facility. There were 4, is that what you're saying? We had 4 actual such calls that we could have charged during that time after we went through an education program with them. So the numbers really went down significantly just by having the hammer available and not actually charging it, but educating them about what we do. So we've seen a decrease in those types of calls. Now that's to the assisted living facility. We're still going out to Grandma and Grandpa's house and we're picking up Grandpa. And I mean, we'll continue to do that. That was never our intent, was to charge Grandma and Grandpa, if you will, for that. It was to target that assisted living facility that was using us as their nighttime
As their staff.
Right, exactly. So we feel like we've turned the tide on that through education, which has been nice.
Well, I commend you for that. I guess I'd point out, anytime that you have to go out and you don't charge, the person who doesn't have fire med, who doesn't have Medicare, there's that much more pressure on them to have a higher rate to cover the entire costs.
Right.
So the guy who is not old enough to have Medicare or doesn't have fire med is footing the bill for someone who has fallen and can't get up, or is a company who is using us.
Right.
I guess. Thanks.
Okay.
But you still do have a lot of the independent senior living facilities that you're having to respond to.
We do respond on a lot of them. A lot of those are legitimate calls that we go to, but 60% of the patients we go on are Medicare patients. A lot of them are living at a senior living facility of some sort.
Yeah.
Okay, so the fire med program, I spoke about that, but we're pretty consistent with that 2,600 memberships each year. That doesn't mean that's how many members we have, because you could have a household where it's mom, dad, and 3 kids. They're all covered under one membership. It's a great program. For anybody who doesn't have it, it definitely will help out if an ambulance is needed. Okay, so I said I wanted to go back to the calls for service because I wanted to show you the chart of where our calls for service are or have been since 2010 and what those have done, and then what they've done this year, or at least where they're on pace for in calendar year. And these are calendar year calls, not fiscal year calls. So we're only just over 4 months and a week basically into this year. But you can see that last year it went up significantly again, another about 1,000 calls. And this year we were on pace to actually do a few less. Now I will tell you that typically the weather starts really changing in May and June and more people get out, and so we're not that far behind, a little more than 100 calls behind our pace where we were last year at this time. So I would anticipate that number will come up. And honestly, it'll probably plateau off from where it was in 2017, or maybe be down just a little bit based on our current pace. And I think, and I'll talk about it here in the next slide, I think I've got a good reason as to why that is occurring. And that's our community paramedic program. We're really reaping positive rewards from our community paramedic program. So just as a reminder, what is our community paramedic? Our community paramedic, we have one, Hillary Kosmicki. She's our community paramedic for our department. She's been on now doing that position for, I believe, about 2.5 years. Maybe just a little bit less than 2.5 years, just a little over 2 years or so. And what she does is she assists with individuals in our community, assists them with accessing health care through a less expensive means. We are the most expensive means. Somebody calls 911, they get an ambulance. They're going to get a bill from us for $1,400, $1,500, depending on how far we take them and you know, what all we do, where we go. That's expensive. That's a lot of money for to get into the healthcare system. We then take them to a hospital. We have to take them to a hospital. If we don't transport to a hospital, we don't get paid by insurance, by Medicare, by Medicaid. So we take them to a hospital. They then go into a hospital and they see an emergency room physician. They maybe get some emergency x-rays, some lab work, some different tests, things like that. And at the end of the day, they may walk out, you know, 4 hours later with a prescription for an antibiotic for pneumonia or something like that. But all total, that's a very expensive way to get to that point. We recognize that. And so what we want to do is we want to try and direct people to the proper level of care, whether it be through their primary care physician or through another agency, Adult and Family Services, Bloom County Mental Health, Benton County Mental Health, something like that. We want to find different means to be able to get them into the system, maybe even before that emergency occurs. So why? Why are we concerned about that? We're concerned about that because our call volume, as you saw from the previous slide, was going up and up and up and up, and we knew we had to do one of two things. Either we've got to keep putting more firefighters on, more paramedics on to deal with these calls, or we got to find a way to turn that tide and to slow that ever-increasing call volume down. So we want to decrease those calls, and by decreasing those calls, that then increases the availability of the existing resources that we have, because we have to have a unit available for that heart attack or that house fire or that major motor vehicle accident. So I want to report on a couple, just some successes, and we've got a number of different numbers that we generated, looked at a number of different ways, but we have some successes with some what we will call repeat customers. In 2017, our top 6 repeat customers generated 92 EMS responses. So between the 6 of them, 911 got called 92 times. We responded out to them, on them, 92 times for those 6 people. 2018, year to date, so far this year, obviously we're not all the way through the year, but those same top 6, who are all still alive and all still in our community, they have generated 9 responses so far this year. That's a 72% reduction in emergency responses. That's significant, and really she's doing an excellent job of connecting people with the proper level of care that they need, making sure that they're not having to call 911. In some cases, educating them about why you call 911, why you don't call 911. But I believe that this is playing a big part in why we're seeing that tide finally start to change maybe a little bit with the number of calls that were going on. I want to talk just briefly about the single role medic units we have with Lebanon and Tangent Fire Districts. We started this program here just a couple of years ago, jointly between our departments. Lebanon provides personnel, they have 4 personnel. Albany provides two single-role paramedics and EMTs that only respond on medical calls. And the purpose of this program, or the program goal, was to keep our dual-role firefighter paramedics in district available and responding on calls in Albany. Prior to this program coming on, we would have a transfer from Albany General Hospital to OHSU up in Portland. We took 2 individuals out of our North Albany station. We sent them to Albany General. They then drove to Portland, with time at hospital and transport and traffic and everything. They were gone for 4 hours, or more at times. That's 4 hours they were not available to respond to a heart attack across the street from Station 14. And so our goal was to put them on, put these single role individuals on at a lesser cost, because they're not dual role, they're not firefighters and paramedics, and then to keep our dual role people in district available for that call. So in 2017, that unit responded on 380 calls for our department. They responded on a good number for Lebanon as well, because they're a shared unit that's housed out of the Tangent Fire Station. But for us alone, they responded on 380 calls. Of those calls, 190 were inter-facility transfers, so taking a patient from Albany General to Good Sam or River Bend or another out of the area hospital. And then they also responded on 190 emergency calls for us. So they're an ALS-equipped ambulance with a paramedic. So they have their first due area. They cover Tangent, Halsey, Shed, that whole area down there for us. And so those 190 calls were made up of calls in Tangent and Halsey, and then also back into Albany, covering calls for us when we would run out of an ambulance or out of ambulances. They would be able to come back and cover for us. That increased those calls that they took for us, the 190 transfers and the 190 emergency calls. That increased the availability of our emergency responders in Albany by just over 500 hours. So that's a significant amount of time that our crews were able to stay here and be able to respond on other calls that occurred at that same time, or at least be available. I want to talk real briefly about our training division. Live fire training is something that is required that we do. It's something that's vital that we do. Well, the first bullet point I want to talk about is just how much we trained. Just below that picture, we trained nearly 10,000 hours documented in 2017. Of those, you can see about 5,600 were fire and 4,100 hours were EMS. So our personnel spent a lot of time training and preparing for the emergencies. That's crucial, that's vital. The first time they go see something and they respond on something, hopefully isn't the first time they've encountered that. Hopefully they've trained for it, they've prepared for it, they've done everything that they can to be able to then know, okay, here's how I have to handle that situation. The live fire training is a key component of that. Over the last couple of years, we've hired a lot of newer firefighters. Our department is transitioning with retirements and growth and some different things like that. And so we need to make sure that we're able to train those individuals adequately. One of the props that we have is a live fire training burn prop. And the larger picture on the right-hand side there is that burn prop there. The pictures on the left are crews going in and actually attacking that fire. What it is it's Connex containers that have been configured to where they can come in one side, turn the corner, and then actually have a fire at the far end and be able to watch that fire grow, understand fire dynamics, learn from it, and then suppress the fire, watch what their hose string does, all kinds of things like that. We are in our budget this year, and I'll refer to it when I get to the budgets, we are expanding that to make it a 2-story burn prop. Right now it's kind of one-dimensional, and you go in the door, you turn a corner, and there's the fire. We're going to be actually adding a second floor to it, so well, maybe that fire's on the first floor and the second floor, or maybe it's on the second floor or on the first floor and you're on the second floor above it. You shouldn't be there, you need to be down where the fire's at. It just allows a lot of different variation for our crews to be able to train with. So that's a significant item that's in our budget, and I'll refer to that when I get to that later. However, one of the things that we do desperately need to do is we need to replace our training tower. We had a training tower at Station 11 that was not included in the construction of new Station 11. I don't recommend that we build one at Station 11, just that's not the place for us to be doing the training. Out at Station 12 is the place where we need a training tower. And that's vital for our crews to be able to have for a number of reasons. High-angle rescue, high-angle training, standpipe operations, different things that require you to go up multiple floors or maybe rappel out of a window or different things like that. We don't have that capability to do those types of functions currently, so we're actually having to send our crews out of district to go to other departments that have those capabilities.
I was wondering, I thought at one time you were sending folks to Corvallis to train in their tower.
We did. We have sent them over to Corvallis, and we actually have crews either getting ready to, or they just finished going over to Polk County. Polk County Fire District 1 has a tower that we're using as well. So that then costs money because we can't respond to calls back here in town from Corvallis or Independence when they're training, so we've got to pay other people to cover while we're sending duty crews over there. So that is a definite need and something that we're going to need to replace here in the near future.
Chief, where do your hazmat team get trained? I mean, is there a special place for that?
There's different places that they will train. They do monthly training, and in fact, I think today was their monthly hazmat training. A lot of times they'll meet at a facility, and they'll maybe train at that facility. They'll train behind Station 12 when they can. Since it's a joint team with Corvallis and Lebanon, they go over to Corvallis, and they'll go to industry over there, and they'll learn about that. Some of it is classroom, and they can do that at Station 11 in the classroom. So they're kind of all over the area. They also go out of the area for training as well. We've sent crews to Texas to deal with oil fires, especially when we were having a lot of that Balkan crude oil that was going through. The pipeline companies were actually paying for training in Texas, and so we sent some crews there. We sent them some different places, so kind of all around, basically.
The burn prop, you have to contain the water that you...
So it sits out on gravel, and you got snow on the ground there, but it sits all on gravel, so they don't use a lot of water because it's pallets that are burning. It's within a container. It's controlled. It's ventilation controlled, so they can open it up or they can choke it down, if you will. So there is some water runoff.
You don't use gasoline or anything like that?
No. It's ordinary combustibles that they're burning in there.
So how often are you using the trailer, that container to burn?
The burn prop, I know every recruit academy, we've had probably about 2 a year. I'll look to the back. How often do you guys know that we're using that?
I'd say at least once a year, all our firefighters are going to go through that burn prop. The crews that want to train more aggressive, they're going to do it more frequently, but at least everybody once. But like Chief mentioned, when it comes to recruit academy time, they'll spend a solid week, fire after fire, dealing with or working in the burn prop.
Wow.
Okay, so getting to the budget. We have, just as a reminder, we have 3 budgets, 1202, 1203, and 1208. 1202 is our public safety levy, 1203 is our fire and life safety division, and then 1208 is the rest, fire emergency services budget. You can see there the total dollar amounts. Our budget went up significantly this year in 1208, and the big reason for that was the additional $500,000 that we're anticipating coming from Millersburg as part of that agreement. That then will go toward hiring additional people. But we believe that it'll be an additional, close to about $500,000. That's what we budgeted for coming in additional revenue to the city. So that's why you see a significant increase in that budget. Then below that, you can see what our breakdown is of personnel costs and then materials and services and the percentage of each of those. One of the things I like to remind the Budget Committee every year is the amount of non-City of Albany property tax revenue that we bring in, that the fire department brings into the city. And the last year we have full data for the entire year, 2016-17. And so in fiscal year 2016-17, we generated a little over $4.9 million in revenue from non-city property taxes. And that supported, or would have supported 35.9% of our actual operating budget in 2016 and 17. So you can see in the pie chart there what the breakdown is, and I referred to this earlier, our ambulance service fees being the largest at 2.8 million. This year, that number is going to go up by probably pretty close to about 300,000, 200 to 300,000. It'll be close to 3.1 million. The rural district contracts in that year were 1.6 million. With Millersburg coming in, it should be probably in excess of about 2 million just in rural district contracts. FireMed, in comparison, is not huge, but it's definitely a big program for us. And then grants, reimbursable programs, and other miscellaneous income brought in a significant amount of money as well.
Question for you? It's probably very difficult for you to guess or to calculate, so appreciate the incredible 4.9 million. Do you have any idea what your expense associated with that? So if the 4.9 went away because you were no longer doing, let's say, rural fire districts, are you upside down on your costs? Are you making money that contributes to paying for other service delivery? What's your guess or gut feel?
So what I can tell you on the rural districts and the amount that they pay, they consume about 5% of our call volume. So when you look at it from that perspective, I guess, at a $16 million budget, they're paying roughly 10% in round numbers, but they're consuming only 5% of the call volume.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You're not upside down.
No, I don't feel like we're upside down on that at all.
It's a good deal for us.
Correct.
But it is further out there.
It is.
So it would be a little more expensive to get there.
Correct. Correct. I did want to take a minute to talk about the 2017 conflagrations. Obviously, that was in the news, I was going to say in the summer, but the summer, fall, and winter with Oregon and California. We sent a lot of personnel on conflagrations this last year, not only as Albany Fire Department, but as the departments in Lynn County, Lynn and Benton for that matter. When we send crews on conflagrations, we send an engine with 4 people on a Type 1 engine or a Type 6 engine with 2 people on it. Their costs are covered, so the personnel costs are covered of whoever went on it. They're covered for their entire time that they're gone, whether it's overtime or their straight time they would have been making back here. And then the costs of any replacements, callback, fill in, to cover for them, their costs are covered as well. So there's no cost that's borne by the city of Albany when we send a crew to California or to anywhere in Oregon on a conflagration. You can see from the 4 Oregon conflagrations how much money that we brought back in to the city to cover those costs. And then the California ones obviously were significantly larger. They were longer deployments. I think the first one wasn't quite 14 days. I believe it was 10 days or so. And the second one, I believe they got pretty close to that 14-day deployment when they went in December. So a total of $987,000 of revenue has come in. Actually, we're still waiting on the second California one to pay. The first one's paid. So, but we will at the end of it get that much money. They also pay for our equipment that goes. And so that money then comes back into our department's equipment replacement fund. So of that $987,000, a little over $180,000 then came in, and we were able to, didn't reimburse any cost at all, other than the cost of the equipment, the wear and tear, if you will. That money then goes back into our equipment replacement fund and helps us with keeping that fund moving forward.
So the cynic in me could infer that it's good business for us to go out on these calls because our equipment replacement budget is not being replenished at the rate it needs to, so we need to say, here, come, call us, please call us.
It helps. It's definitely a way that we're able to help out. I will say 180,000 is extremely unusual. This was an extremely unusual year. The year before, 2016, our total conflagration receipts were in the $10,000 magnitude.
Okay.
The year before was, I believe, our largest year to date, obviously prior to this, and it was $240,000.
So we can advertise, have rig will travel or something like that?
We could, definitely.
Well, but you're lowering the value of your equipment when you do that. It's being
It's a-
worn out.
Yeah, it's not a one-for-one dollar,
Yeah.
but
You're just
understood.
using it up, but you're getting paid for it,
Right.
Terry?
being neighborly.
But isn't there some backfill in terms of the people that you have to overstress on, in terms of filling for those guys when they're gone, or gals?
As far as the stress on the people back?
Yeah.
Oh, most definitely. When you've got, I think probably about the most number that we sent this last year was 11 or 12, somewhere around there at one time. There's people that have to fill back in for them, and they're working a lot of overtime, and that does cause stress. I will say that our people do an outstanding job of when that occurs, they're ready, willing, and able to come in and help out the community. They understand that other communities are burning up, and it's time to jump in and help out. I did want to point out, I really do like this picture, because it's something you're probably not going to see here in Oregon. Not the big column in the back you would see, but the tall palm trees you probably wouldn't see in Oregon. So this is definitely from one of those calls down in California.
And yet they're still wearing jackets, so it's cool.
You know, this could have been December. They did deal with some chills down there, I believe.
So where in our budget book does the conflagration money come in?
So, go ahead.
It comes into the general fund revenues. There's a separate line item for it.
Okay.
And I guess something to point out, when you're looking at our budget for this current year in 1208, you will notice that if you look at the actuals for the current year, our overtime budget is $675,000, and year-to-date, we've expended $973,000. So it really appears that, wow, we're really way over. The big reason is because of the conflagrations. If you were to remove the overtime from the conflagrations, we would actually still be under a little bit under budget, and we may be going over for the year by the end of the year, but we'd still be under budget once you remove that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that was the conflagrations. Getting into more details on the budgets, 1202, which is our public safety levy. As a reminder, that funds 7 firefighter EMT positions, 1 compliance deputy fire marshal. Those are the inspectors that go out and inspect the businesses. You will notice that there are increased personnel costs in there. Those came from contractual negotiated items, additional team pays, things like that, and so that led to the increased personnel costs. We've already talked about it earlier, so I won't talk any more about it than to say that we too saw a pretty good increase in our central service charges. We did decrease the amount this year in order to try and do everything that we wanted to do. We had to cut back in our equipment replacement, so there is some decreased funding in equipment replacement. Now, with that being said, we're finding other resources, other means, such as the conflagrations, to be able to put some money in, but we weren't able to fund equipment replacement in this coming year the same as this current year. And then the last item, just to highlight in there, is our IT equipment replacement. That's our portion of paying back the CAD RMS system upgrade that Chief Latanzio talked about. We did a 10-year loan from, I believe it was the IT department, the IT equipment replacement funds. And so each year we're paying back a portion of that.
Does the reduction in equipment replacement starting to get to the level where it potentially is going to affect the fire rating because of not having the necessary equipment to, or does that even affect it at all?
Yeah, no, I don't think it'll affect it as far as like the ISO rating. You're talking about that? Yeah. We're getting ready here in the next handful of months to do another ISO rating, and I believe that our equipment is such that it's not going to have an impact on that rating at all. It is definitely something looking long-term, though, that we've got to be aware of, because I sat down the other day and I came up with about $2.5 million of equipment-related expenses in my mind that we needed to purchase over the next probably 3 to 4 years. So there's some big ticket items out there. We've got engines that are pushing 30 years old. I believe they'll be 29 this next year, and we have stated that we wanted to only keep an engine for 25 years. And we during the recession, we pushed a number of those out. Some we've been able to get back on track with, but some we're still behind on. So trying to find ways to put more money toward equipment replacement is key for us.
Chief? Notice 65005, breathing air. Do we have our own compressor?
We do. We have an air compressor out at Station 12.
Okay. $25,000? That's a bunch of air.
Well, Shane, go ahead.
Without going, just off the top of my head, that $25,000, it really isn't filling air, because a compressor, the only cost of the compressor is the maintenance and having the air samples done on it. That cost is repair of our SCBA's, wearing someone's face mask, breaks.
Oh, okay, so it's not breathing air, it's equipment.
Yeah,
Correct.
Everything associated with that.
Hey, I was about to save us a whole bunch of money.
1203 is our next budget. It's our fire and life safety. Just some highlights on that. Again, increased personnel costs for the same reasons as 1202, but you'll see a more significant increase in there. And the reason for that is that we made the decision to move our community paramedic into that budget. Was supported out of the fire emergency services budget, and really being a part of our community risk reduction community risk reduction staff. We wanted to better reflect that by moving that position into this budget. We are, speaking of that position, we are continuing to explore cost recovery options for that. I think I've spoke about that before as well, trying to see if we can enter into a contract with Samaritan or somebody else to help provide those services. We're doing everything we can to explore opportunities. That position, like I said, has been on staff for just over 2 years, about almost 2.5 years now. During that time, we've received grants to cover her first 2 years, or 2 of those years of her wages and benefits, and then operating costs as well. So we're continuing to look for ways to get cost recovery on that. I'm happy to report, others may not be because they're now having to pay it, but I'm happy to report we're no longer paying space rental for Albany, for City Hall. So that's exciting. We pay our own rental over there and have our own bills, but we're not responsible for space rental out of this budget or out of 1208. I did want to just highlight, and as you look at it, there's not a significant decrease in it, but I did want to mention a decrease in insurance and bonds. And the big reason was because when I looked at my presentation last year, I highlighted the fact that our insurance and bonds had gone up so much. And so since they went down, and not by a small amount, not a huge amount, but still, I mean, a significant savings there on insurance and bonds, I felt it was worthy to at least mention that they had gone back down after that significant increase in the current year's budget. The city emergency manager I talked about, his materials and supplies are paid for out of this budget. He is a jointly funded position. All the departments get to utilize him and his services, and so all the departments then pay into that. But his materials and services come out of that 1203 budget. Again, increased central service charges, and as a department, we're going to continue to focus on community risk reduction.
Nice picture, too.
Thank you. I love seeing the kids wear the life jackets. We have life jackets available at every station, and starting here coming up Memorial Day through Labor Day, they'll be there, and they get used a lot.
And not being altruistic, our Kiwanis Club helps with that, too.
Very good. Thank you very much. They do. And then 1208 is again our largest budgets, our emergency services. Some highlights of that. On the emergency responder side, we're in the process right now of hiring 3 firefighter paramedics to help staff that Millersburg station. That is being paid for by Millersburg, City of Millersburg. And also a change this year from last year is that we're paying the city's portion of 6 SAFER funded grant firefighter paramedics. Last year I reported that we were applying for that. We were waiting to hear back. Positive news was that we heard back, and 1st of October we were able to hire 6 paramedic firefighters as part of the SAFER grant, a 3-year program. But there is some cost share involved in that. So this budget now contains that cost share for those 6 positions over the next 3 years. On the emergency responder side, I was really hoping to be able to add an additional single role staff this year to add to the Medic 71 program down in Tangent. The more that we're able to put on there, the more hours of the day we're able to cover, the more transfers we can cover, the more we keep our dual role people in town available. I had hoped to be able to include a paramedic this year. Lebanon was trying to then add an EMT, and together we would go from having 6 combined employees to 8 employees. There just wasn't the funding to be able to do that. I think there's great value in doing that, and just providing additional coverage for our community and for the neighboring communities as well. Under the materials and services, our contractual services, you'll notice, went up pretty significantly, and that's related to increased call volume equals increased cost for dispatch services. We're dispatched, as are all of the fire departments in Lynn County, dispatched through the Lynn County Sheriff's Office, and they have looked more closely at how they're being funded. They get obviously funded from each of the fire districts, each of the fire departments, the 8 in the county, and they also get funded by the Lynn County Sheriff's Office and other avenues as well. What they discovered is that the fire departments were paying, if my numbers are correct, they were paying about 14.9% of the cost of doing the services of dispatching, but we were using closer to about 19% of the resources. When they looked at their call volume, comparing fire calls to law enforcement calls, we were about 19% of those call volume, but we were only paying about roughly 15% of that. So they changed their fee structure. We went, as the county chiefs, we all sat down and looked at that. That then resulted in us paying more for services to try and get more parity between us and what law enforcement is paying. But then with our significantly increasing call volume over the last handful of years, we're then paying more than others are paying for that. So in the current year, we're paying about $145,000 for dispatch services. Next year, our fee will go to about $200,000. They're phasing it in over a 3-year period. By the end of the 3 years, we'll be at about $250,000 for dispatch services. But that's directly related to what our call volume is. Again, space rental, we're not having to pay that any longer because we're no longer here at City Hall. 61020, always get a question on that, so I wanted to try and head that off up front. Licensing and accreditation, that number goes up every other year and it goes down the opposite year. We're on a 2-year recertification cycle for our EMTs, our paramedics. That is a fee that we pay. It's a one-time every other year fee, so you see that go up, and then the following year you'll see a drop in that amount as well. 61025, our medical supplies, same thing, increased call volume, it means increased cost. We're using more supplies out there in the field, and that costs money, so there's an increase in that as well. 62009, our water rescue equipment, we're replacing some aging, I believe they're close to 15 or 20-year-old dry suits that we have for our water rescue team, so they're at the end of their lifespan, so we're replacing those, so we've dedicated some additional funds to that. You'll notice an equipment replacement in this budget. I don't believe we put anything in this budget. Overall, we do have about $60,000 going toward equipment replacement, but that's less than the little over $200,000 that we put in the current year. And then the last thing I want to highlight there was the capital equipment 7005. $40,000 of that $50,000 is to that live fire training prop, allowing us to put a second story on that and create more complex training scenarios for our personnel. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
You answered the ones I'd highlighted for the water rescue equipment. I was going to ask what was that about, and you covered it. It's all good.
Terry?
The Millersburg thing, do they have people out there now that you will assimilate into your team, or that are fighting fires out there? Or?
Currently, they're covered by Jefferson Fire District. Oh. So their station that's out there, it's an all-volunteer station. It's part of the Jefferson Fire District. So no, there won't be any personnel that are currently out there that will come over to our department.
So you actually have to staff up to...
Correct.
How good is that facility they have out there?
The station they have out there? I actually haven't been in it. I understand it's aging. It's smaller. It doesn't have any living quarters in it. It will still belong to Jefferson Fire District. They will still retain ownership of that. We're only protecting within the city limits of Millersburg, so there's all the area to the west that's outside the city limits, that Jefferson will still cover that area.
Equipment comes with it too?
Equipment comes with that.
With this station and,
Well, we're not taking over that station. That station still stays with Jefferson.
So we have to provide an engine for the staff as
engine
well?
Yeah. Millersburg will contribute funding toward equipment replacement once this arrangement gets up and running.
And that's their long-term plan, is that they will have their new facility when they create that, but will staff it?
Yes.
They don't,
Yeah, what they want and what we want too is they want it to be an Albany fire station staffed by us. So our crews will go that way toward Millersburg and help them when they have a structure fire, and their crews will come back into Albany and backfill us and respond on calls in Albany, and it'll just be another Albany fire station. It'll just be paid for by the city of Millersburg.
okay. And on the training tower that you'd like to replace at some point, what's your rough cost on that?
I think if I remember right, we were around, do you remember, Shane, a dollar amount?
No, I wouldn't feel good throwing out a number.
Yeah. It all depends on how complex you want to go. Corvallis built a training tower and kind of a training center, and they spent $4.1 million, I think, for it or something like that. I don't think we need something that complex. I think to actually get a tower, our training chief isn't here, but I think we're probably talking, just for a tower, probably closer to the $500,000 to $1 million would get us the actual building that we need with the technology that we need in it.
Concrete?
Yeah, probably, most likely.
That was Corvallis's.
Yeah.
Corvallis is concrete. I know Lebanon is wood. Having seen both in operation, concrete.
Yeah, firewood, no.
Scott's?
I didn't give a chance to ask Chief of this, but could you tell us a little bit about the efficiencies that you've gained as a result of your new station? I mean, I understand disaster preparedness and response, I understand the mold issues, things like that, but can you speak a little bit to efficiencies gained as a operation as a result of a new facility?
Yeah. The biggest efficiency that I can think of is communications efficiency. Whereas it used to be, I'd have to track somebody down, or the management team or staff would have to track somebody down. Now you walk down the hall, you go to their office, you knock on the door, and you go in, and you have that conversation with them. And I realized that very early on when I was able to, in the first couple of weeks, had a thought of, I need to make sure and let this person know about this. In the past, I would sit down, I'd take the time, I'd type out an email, I'd get interrupted, I'd go off, I'd do something else, I'd come back, I didn't send that email. It just took time to actually put it down, whereas now I can just walk down the hall and I can talk to them. I think that communication not only is true downstairs, but it's also true to upstairs. And what I mean by that is downstairs is our day staff, upstairs is our emergency responders. Our battalion chiefs are now in the same station that we're in. I see the battalion chiefs come down very frequently and come to the assistant chief's office, their supervisor, and talk to him about what's going on, update on different things. So I think that efficiency is really throughout the organization, and it's that communication, it's the time saving, it's people knowing what's going on and keeping people informed and aware of stuff.
Bill?
In terms of training, you used to have an indoor training area on the south end of the bus barn. Is that still being utilized?
Yes, that is still there, still utilized by crews for different types of training scenarios. It's actually used by, I was going to say APD, but I think LCSO uses it as well. Local law enforcement use it for, practicing, breaching a structure or going in and taking somebody out. So it does get used quite a bit as well.
And you have like a covered earth tunnel area?
Mm-hmm.
Also, that's...
Yeah, that's a confined space prop that crews are able to go in and they can have a trapped victim and they can go in and extricate them out of there.
So with the tower, combine all of these things into one prop to utilize, or?
You know, it wouldn't combine it into one prop, but it would combine a lot of this stuff into one area. You know, this goes back to the conversation that we've been having for quite some time of trying to relocate the city buses somewhere else. That's a significant issue for us and for our department, because when crews are training back there, the buses, you know, have to come in on their route, and they have to switch drivers, and we've got to stop, break down hose, and it interrupts things. Having them out of there gives us additional space, because obviously they're taking up a number of the bays that are in the bus barn currently that would be hopefully available for us to utilize. But it also then disrupts the training that's going on. So having a training tower and relocating the buses would really help tie the whole area together.
Unfunded liabilities or responsibility, equipment replacement, not talking improved program delivery and training like a new tower, a multiple story building. What should your current yearly equipment replacement funding be, and what is your come to balance number? Meaning, you should have been contributing over the past 10, 20 years, and you're upside down this amount, and at some point in time, that can comes to rest and we have to fix it.
So I'm going to look back and see, and this is a little bit, this is from the end of last year, the last number that I printed up, but if we were to try and come to balance in the current year, it is about $2.25 million.
Okay.
And that was part of your question. What was the?
The other is, what is an appropriate funding level per year? If you were already came to balance and you just need to appropriately allocate each year?
In my opinion, it would probably be closer to about that $250,000 range.
Okay.
We got really close last year, but if we were fully funded, that I think would keep us on pace moving into the future.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you, Chief.
All right, thank you for your time.
So the question has been asked, are we going to call it a night?
I don't need to call it a night, I just need to call it a break.
How long?
You can take a break anytime.
I think Parks has most of the staff here, so are you wanting to proceed? We can take a break.
It's entirely up to you.
I'd like to get home by 10:30.
Well, Dick says we have till 10:30.
No, he has to be home by 10:30, so.
I think we can still do it. But do we want a 5-minute break?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Yes.
5-minute break, we'll be back for Parks.
Just to stand up.
I don't know.
It's an early morning, 6 a.m. flight somewhere, so.
Fire them off the committee.
Are we ready?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for getting to me tonight. That'll make the next meeting more interesting, I'm sure. I'm just going to really process this as quickly as I can and just highlight a few things. Let's go to this slide right here. I think you have the slides as handouts. Just going to add a couple of cliff notes to each section that might be interesting to you. Obviously, I want to start with what the department does in general and what purposes the money is put to that are budgeted, and we'll talk about the budget after that. And so we manage property, obviously, and property includes developed parks and open space. It also includes other properties in the city public system, street rights of way and things like that that have landscapes that need to be taken care of. So we do some of that. We have trails, obviously. One point I wanted to make here is we haven't really added since the last fiscal year, the last budget, to our property inventory. So there's been no change there. The only thing that is added for next year's budget is that we are also responsible for the plants, the trees, and the furniture on the sidewalks in the streetscape downtown. And we've been taking care of that ever since the First Avenue streetscape was built. And I'm not talking about the lighting, that's another responsibility. But we take care of the plants and the site furniture as best we can. I would add that no money ever came to the Parks and Recreation Fund for that purpose, but we got tired of watching things deteriorate, and we just simply assumed responsibility several years ago. And now we're going to take responsibility on for the blocks that we're completing right now in the streetscape program. The urban forest is a part of that story. A note here that we have about 15,000 trees in the street right-of-way or the public right-of-way. That excludes the several thousand more that are in parks, obviously. We won't even begin to count those. The reason I mention that is that the number of trees goes up every time a new street is built, right? Because our code requires trees to be built on many public streets, not necessarily all of them, but many of them. Again, those resources are flat going into next year's budget. We haven't received an increase for caring for public street trees since, I think, my first year here, 2003. So the costs continue to go up, and so what happens is the Parks and Recreation Fund, with the resources that are dedicated to the fund, pick up that slack. We get revenues also from the street fund. I believe that's $80,000 a year. And we also get some money from the general fund. But those two numbers have stayed flat for almost as long as I've been here. So that's something for you to be mindful of. It just simply puts additional pressure on our ability to cover the entire scope of services for which we are responsible. We're very proud, by the way, of the work that we do with those limited resources. Community festivals are our pride and joy. Most of you know the events that we run, especially in the summer. The only thing I want to highlight here is that we bring a lot of people to those events, and a lot of those people, not necessarily, a large percentage, but a lot of people do come from out of town to visit Albany and attend those events. They may not all stay overnight. In fact, only about 3%, I think, is what we estimated, for example, that visit Northwest Art and Air actually stay in a motel. But that's not an insignificant number, and when we did an economic impact analysis with some survey work at Northwest Art and Air several years ago, we came up with an estimate of about $5 million. I'm still using that $5 million number, but we know intuitively that number is much higher than it used to be. But since I don't know exactly what that number is, I don't fake it. I'm going to highlight also, and I guess what I should do is try to keep track of this, right? There we go. Building maintenance is under our responsibility. Rick Barnett, sitting next to me, supervises or is managing or overseeing building maintenance, with Tom Valentino as the building maintenance supervisor. We now have 45 buildings in the inventory and their grounds, and about 450,000 square feet of building that we take care of. In some way, shape, or form, lots of buildings like the new police and fire stations, for example, aren't nearly as demanding, obviously, and won't be for quite some time as some of our older buildings are. City Hall is a very demanding building to take care of. Rob is back there. He hasn't gone yet, has he? All right, he's there. So I've got to say something about aquatics. We do have aquatics. Rob is managing our aquatics for us. It's actually one of our most beloved programs. The following is significant. Bill Coburn, I think, frequents the place, don't you, Bill?
I do.
Yeah, and he knows Rob, and he puts up with all of Rob's jokes every morning.
Just Friday.
Which is, I really admire you, Bill, for that, because they're pretty bad. A point here to make is that aquatics, the pool does host swim meets, several swim meets a year. Those swim meets are typically more than one day. They're typically 2 to 3 days, and that means that people come and they stay and they spend money here as well. So there's an economic impact associated with those swim meets, as well as the softball tournaments that draw participants over multiple days that we get. We just secured a national softball tournament for the year 2020 that will put heads in beds, roughly 65 teams and their fellow travelers over 3 days in Albany in 2020, and we worked with our lodging industry here to secure that bid. So we're developing an attraction out there. Yes.
I was just telling Rob during the break that, so Saturday morning I was at the South Albany pool, and because there was a big tournament and I had relation that came in from Grants Pass. So it was a 3-day, it was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday for that tournament, and there, Saturday morning, it was literally packed inside the pool, parking every green space, and even across the street on 36 at the neighbor's field, people were parking. It was just, and they had a track meet or something going on.
There's another reason, yeah.
It was.
Kiwanis track meet.
Yeah, it was just jammed with people, but amazing to have, for the swim meet, the pool inside was just jammed with folks, and they were all from out of town. I mean, it was from teams all over, all over
Well, and the reason
Oregon,
the reason the meets are held here as opposed to somewhere else with another 50-meter pool is because of the staff that we have here. Rob and his staff are great hosts. And the facility is pretty well operated and maintained, given its age. And we are constantly attempting and to try to kind of put the finger in the dike and make it last longer. And Rob and his guys do a great job of that, along with our building maintenance staff. And we'll also be receiving some improvements here shortly with bond work from the school district.
Yeah, it was
so that's
great.
great. Yeah. We'll go back. Just a reminder that we do lots of other things as well. We have 3 city commissions that we liaison and support with our staff. We have a public arts program. We also, for some of you who may not know, we do the Sawing for Schools program, which has yielded quite a bit of board footage and lumber over the years, and a pretty significant value, and the school district tells us without this contribution, their woodshop programs wouldn't exist. So we do add value in that arena as well.
Ed?
Yes, yeah.
Sawing for Schools has been 3 years, every year, and I don't know why it's happening.
Okay.
But my next door neighbor, Mr. McMines.
Yes, right.
Does the sawing.
Yes.
And it seems like the paper doesn't see his name, doesn't know who he is, gives all kinds of people all kinds of credit, and he's the one out there sweating. with his saw, with his gas, with his whatever else.
Yeah, Rich, I'm really glad you brought that up. Rick, I think, wants to add a
Yeah,
little bit.
Justin is really a key to that program's success. He is excited about the students learning. In fact, as he does it one year, he talks about, well, what can we do next year to make it better? So he has his own business, but he takes a good share of time and effort to do this, so he does need to get.
Well, he's critical. Without him,
He
the
has a
program wouldn't
job,
exist.
plus he has a business.
Yeah, that's
plus he
right.
does, you know.
That's right. He's a great member of the community.
He's really a huge reason why it's
So,
going as well.
I don't know, maybe a couple of reminders to somebody's ear at some point might not, and if not a reminder, maybe a baseball bat, I don't know.
Let's invite him to a council meeting and give him an attaboy.
There you go. That'd be great.
We
All
can do
right,
that.
so that's what we do, just in summary, that's the scope of services that we provide. I want to talk a little bit about how we do it, and then we'll talk about the cost and what the budget looks like. We do this with a lot of help. We have roughly this year signed up 190 sponsors in the community. Most of them are local businesses. And so we look for opportunities to thank them. We do our best, but each and every one of you can be a part of that thank you team. It's really important for us to extend that to them. Gifts and donations in the next budget year will amount to about $626,000. That's cash and in-kind services. That's up 16% from the year before, our best estimate. Roughly $358,000 of that is cash, and the rest of it is in kind. So give you a little bit of a perspective there. By the way, just a little footnote. We have 14 FTE on the recreation and events side of the department. And so that number comes to $44,700 per person, per FTE that is raised, or projected to be raised this next year. So if you think about $44,000, almost $45,000 per FTE, that's a big chunk of the value of that FTE that's covered. That's important to note. If you look at, you add to that number the fees that we collect throughout the course of the year, that number jumps up to $104,000 per FTE for each of those 14 FTEs. So a little food for thought. These positions don't just cost money. They actually generate some value that helps offset some of those costs, plus all the benefits in the community, which I think many of you would acknowledge. So I think, we talk metrics, Scott, a lot, and I think those are really important metrics to share. Really big, volunteers. We have a total of 29 point some FTE in the next year's budget for the entire department. We're talking about adding another 18 FTE through volunteer hours each and every year. Those volunteers are valued for us at roughly $1 million by federal numbers. They're much more valuable to us than that. So I wanted to share that with you. Let's see, where are we? There we are. This is, all right. So 29.94, okay, 30. I said 29, it's 30. FTE. That's about 0.57 FTE for every 1,000 people that live in Albany. That's significantly lower than the national, our peers in a national level of 0.79. Still about 2.5, 3 positions below the FY 2010 number. So we've been operating for about 8 years below where we were in 10. I mentioned securing cash. That's roughly $8.25 for every man, woman, and child that lives here in Albany. That, by the way, compares favorably, again, with our peers nationally. Those averages are around 75 cents per capita. So we do pretty good at this work. I guess one more note here, 65% of all the work that we do in terms of tasks is accomplished by someone other than a Parks and Recreation Department employee. We basically coordinate and oversee activities. Examples would be mowing contractors, for example. We farm out most of our mowing. Contract instructors for classes. We contract out nearly all of the course instruction. Very little direct instruction mostly by staff, it's coordination. So again, we get a lot of mileage out of very few FTE. We try to manage change. We've had a lot of it over the years. Since 2006, our park acreage has jumped by 50%. By the way, our staff numbers have not. Attendance at summer events has nearly doubled since 2005. That's probably a conservative estimate. All right, let's talk budget. The budget that I'm going to focus on is Fund 202, the Park and Recreation Fund. We also are occasionally found in the Grants Fund, and we mentioned Central Services, the Building Maintenance Fund, a little bit earlier. I'm not going to be talking about building maintenance unless you have specific questions. If you have questions, I'm going to farm them out to Rick. Our budget starts on page 146 of your budget notebook. All right, revenues. This is roughly where the revenues come from. I'm going to zero in on property taxes first. This next budget year, the percentage of our total revenue, and this is for just operating revenue. It doesn't include park SDCs, which is a really big program budget. Would be about 66% of our operating program revenues. And that number has been lower in the past. And the reason it's up this year is because we're not going to be carrying as much money forward from the end of this fiscal year into the next year. The beginning budget next year is much lower than it has been over the last several years. And there are reasons that I'll explain earlier, or a little bit later. Gifts and donations is about the same percentage-wise, but the number has actually gone up just a little bit. Charges for service, significantly higher than it has been in years past. The rest of it, really, it's really about property tax and then how we offset or pick up the rest of the cost of the budget with non-tax revenues. And so that's what the rest of the budget looks like. The unanticipated expenses that we had this year really lower the amount of money that we can carry forward into the next fiscal year. Unanticipated expenses would be things like we mowed more this year because of plant growth. We didn't expect to mow that much, so that excess mowing cost has to come from somewhere else in the budget. So we forego doing other things in order to, tackle the additional contract mowing costs. That impacts that bottom line and what we're going to end up with at the end of the year. Deerfield Park, the counselors will remember that we entered in an agreement with the school district, a very complex agreement with several properties involved. The nut is that we'll pay $50,000 a year out of the park fund for the next 6 years, including this past year, to the school district to purchase Deerfield Park and finally get it off the books as a lease. Then we can start to do something with that property because we'll own it. Those are examples. And we also had unanticipated major equipment replacement costs this year that weren't budgeted. So we had to pick up those costs as well. That begins to explain why we're going to carry fewer dollars forward as a year-end surplus than we have in previous years. And that means that we have less money to balance next year's budget, so the money has to come from other places. Bottom line for us, as you would see in the budget, and I'm trying to remember which page it is. Oh, it's page 47, 147 and 148. 148 shows the total revenue line, and you'll see it's about 2% lower than it was last year. And that's explained not because taxes are going down. Taxes incrementally go up, and we reap the benefits of that. But other revenue streams aren't as available to us next year. And that major revenue stream is the beginning balance that I just spoke to. It's gone down. So that's the primary difference between the two budgets. In order to, it's a special revenue fund, and so we have to balance the checkbook each and every year. We have to estimate the total revenues, and then we can't spend any more than that. And so on the expenditure side, we'll see this year $9.97 million in total expenditures. 7.25 of that is within our operating programs, maintenance, administration, adult services, those kinds of things. Another $2.7 million would be our self-supporting funds, that's Park SDCs as the primary contributor to that number. And that makes up a total of $9.97 million. All right, the pie looks like this. Again, there aren't major changes from one program to another, just a percentage or two going in one direction or another. I want to make a note for you on administration. Administration seems proportionately out of balance, or it seems too large. I say this every year. That's because administration is where we put all of our overhead charges, our central service charges for the entire department, for all programs. We put IT charges in there for all programs. Rather than dispersing or allocating those to individual programs, it's just too hard to do that. So we just gave up on it years ago. We used to do that, and it just didn't make any sense. So now we capture all those costs in administration. Administration is also where we, for the most part, budget, other than Park STCs, any money we want to put toward capital improvements. Sunrise Park, for example, the Parks Fund portion of Sunrise is coming out of Parks Administration through Program 1507, which is the park capital. All right, I'm almost done. All right, so that's in a nutshell the budget. Revenues, balanced expenditures, and this is how we split the pies, right? And you know what we're trying to accomplish with the revenues that we're receiving through those expenditure programs. We have issues. Some of these issues are quite familiar to you. We have a park master plan that's being updated right now. We still have $17 million worth of unfunded projects that were decided in that last master plan. The number is probably going to go up in the new master plan, but we don't have a source of funds for most of those projects. So that's a problem for this community. And in my year that I continue to work with the city, our council especially is going to hear directly from me how big a problem that is, and I'm going to be making some pretty direct recommendations for how to deal with it. I'm not ready to do that yet because I don't want Rich to ask too many questions of me until we get back there. I'm not ready yet, Rich.
I do have a reputation.
Yeah, you're the one.
Yeah.
All right, Sunrise Park, as I said, is underway. It should be done by the end of July of this summer. If you haven't been out there, take a look. Making tremendous progress. We ended up with a tremendous, really great contractor, North Core, out of Salem. A couple of SDC-funded projects this year will include new pickleball courts. Some of you remember the pickleballers coming this way. It's amazing how fast that sport has grown, and we're way out of balance on the number of courts that we need now. So it's a Park SDC project. They'll bring some money to the table. And then the council will remember that in that Gaps City's agreement dealing with land, we're going to be buying a new park site on Timber Ridge between the two schools, the new elementary school and the existing Timber Ridge school.
From whom?
I'm sorry?
From who?
Ourselves.
Oh, okay.
From Pepsi. I've got to pay back the Pepsi fund for 2 acres.
Economic development.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, goodness,
Yeah. When I can argue how much that park is going to contribute to economic development, maybe I'll get a discount, but not right now. All right.
Dream on.
Yeah, I know. Current repair and replacement, the deferred maintenance backlog just continues to grow, and we talked about this. We're exceeding $3.5 million in deferred maintenance, unfunded liabilities right now, and that number is growing about $100,000 a year. And we just don't have any source of funds to cover that right now. So that's another problem that Rick and I are going to try to address in some way over the next year. We need the foundations to be much more active than they are right now, so we'll be working hard to activate them, both the senior foundation and the new Parks and Recreation Foundation. My biggest worry over the next couple of years really has to do with, outside of capital funding and deferred maintenance funding, which is huge, it's having enough bodies in park maintenance to actually keep up with this growing backlog of maintenance. Again, this is an unfunded thing right now, and we'll be coming up with some strategies to share with the council, ultimately with the budget committee in the next round. Mario mentioned a proposal for the park ranger. I also have this issue on my list. I'm very supportive of Mario's proposal at some level. If we have 15 to 20 significantly large cleanups a year, which I think is probably an underestimate, and if those cost us $1,000, there's the potential to avoid some of those cleanup costs if we have someone patrolling the parks and maybe getting in front of the problem. With 8 field staff in park maintenance covering roughly 112 acres a person, they just can't get out there more than once, maybe at most twice a week, to any acre of park. And so some of those spaces are really difficult for us to monitor, right? So I think a ranger could help. 18 FTE in park maintenance, those are the field staff, not the supervisor. That's roughly 0.15 FTE for every 1,000 residents in Albany. So we're not overstaffed on the park maintenance side.
So Ed,
Yeah.
have you kept track of all the expenses of cleaning up camps at the parks?
We're trying to, and Rick, you might want to add.
Yeah, we're trying to. It's, we clean up kind of on a daily sort of basis, and then we're using our newer computer program for us that's going to help us with some of that. A good example is underneath the bridge there on Bryant Way. We did one about 3 weeks ago, and it cost us, I kept real close track of it, cost us just over $1,000 to clean that up. And that's pretty typical, and that one's pretty easy to get to. Some of them they were talking about, like at the end of Takina Landing, those are much more difficult and will cost a lot more money.
If you remember Camp Boondoggle?
Oh, yeah.
This one challenges the scale of Camp Boondoggle, is what we've been told. So,
Yeah, it's somewhere in there. It's more in that scale than these smaller ones.
So it's
And
down
on
on
a daily
Takina
basis,
Landing, you said? Is it Takina Landing?
You know where the Carnegie Farm is?
Right.
It's right next to the Carnegie Farm. Peter's the one actually alerted us to it.
Okay, because he was allowing Terry, that was from Camp
Yeah, that's
Boondoggle,
another
to live
issue,
out
but,
there.
yeah.
But so there's a camp
Yeah,
before it.
this is much bigger than just one
It just,
person.
I think it's just great for the public to know of what all the costs are that we've been adding up. Like it's, Salem had announced the last 5 years was $3 million, and Portland had $1 million, just to be able to clean up the camps. Because, I kind of, when we had some of the agencies that were here that, were in support of our, enhancement area, law enforcement enhancement area, I had mentioned to them, well, maybe help us start paying for the cost if you're going to enable homelessness. So I just think if we had numbers, get the word out there, and I've been telling some agencies, help us out to pay that cost then, so.
we really work closely with the police on this, and now that as they get done with school, they'll have more staff time out in these natural areas and stuff, which will again spike the number of these camps and stuff for the summer.
Yeah, that'd help. I mean, most of the public do not realize, that all of this camps comes with the costs associated.
Well, and then that's really the takeaway, is that that kind of activity costs the city money. It costs the city money either direct cash, or it costs in terms of a diversion of employees from their normal duties to take on something like this, which means other things don't get taken care of, other and very important things. So it is something for us we've got to come up with a more effective way of telling the story, and we're working on that.
Have we offered to have invite some of these groups who have a problem with our enforcement to come during a cleanup day and see just how much junk there is and how big of a problem it is?
They'll be
I mean, there's-
invited.
Well, yeah, invite, have a cleanup day for the camp or the whatever it is. And, to the people who are really involved in the community, I don't think most of them have seen that.
Yeah.
They've seen the people in a different environment.
I think, again, Rich, we can do a better job. I just don't know quite how it unfolds. We can do a much better job of
Tracking.
communicating, but communicating more effectively to our community what that looks like. Maybe we need to be posting some videos of what a camp and what the cleanup looks like and how much time and effort it takes. And that might be something that we explore.
Yeah, I think it'd be great.
And I'm ready for questions. Yeah.
Okay. I think you addressed it earlier in the year, maybe at one of our work sessions or council. I'm looking at, on the Parks Revenues, page 147, Lumber to Legacy Program Revenues.
Yes.
And then going over to page 156 on Park Maintenance Services, there's two line items for Lumber to Legacy, and it looks like the net is we've lost $16,000.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to have to look at the number because I'm not.
Yeah, on page 156, it's items 61077 and 69026.
Yeah, so I'll let Rick explain that.
Yeah, as far as the expenses, we had started a program helping send students to Portland to woodworking school, kind of an advanced woodworking, and that's where 10,000 of that is of the expense. We're not going to be able to fund that next year. The other 4,000 is a reserve that Ed said put in there just in case, and so that's where that's at. So that's where most of that expense is.
So on the revenue side, Ray, the revenue there would come from the sale of items that had been previously
We saw them out here in the lobby.
Yeah, that's
and stuff
right,
like
that's
that.
right.
Okay.
We still have a handful of those pieces
And
left.
one last item on page 162, the Adult Recreation Services, 1413 program.
Okay.
62228, Senior Event Materials. There's a $9,000 item there that doesn't seem like it was anything previous years.
Yeah, it's a new account. We just kind of separated that expense from other material accounts.
So it's for,
It's specifically related to events at the senior center. For example, St. Patrick's Day, for example.
oh, okay, when we have the lunches.
Previously, it
and
was the cost of materials and food and things like that were just tossed into materials and services in a general account, and it was covering everything. We wanted to get a better handle on what our out-of-pocket expenses were for each and every one of these things. That's why this account is set up.
So like when I'm serving food there, it's helping pay for all that type of stuff, is what you're saying?
Yeah, if we are paying for food out of our own pockets as opposed to having a sponsor come in, which is more typical, anything that's directly out of pocket, we're trying to capture more precisely than we have previously.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any further questions? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
So thanks for hanging in there, everybody. This meeting is continued to May 15th.
And I will be in Portland that evening. Come on, see here.
And which departments will we have on May 15th?
I think we're going through the order of the book, unless
Just
there's
order
been
the
a
book or
change.
straight on
No?
down the next two or three? Okay.
Hi there. Pardon? I haven't had, I'm gone to tomorrow. I didn't have time today.
I got to read it.